Hey, and welcome back to another video. This is the 8th episode of the narrative, which takes place 3 years after the war with the Akatsuki, and Naruto is ready to gain a surprising new colleague to finally take the Chunnin examinations. Please support by liking and subscribing. Let's start the show. Hanabi eyed him intently. It can't be all that bad, she said. Oh yes it is. I'll have to take you to Mount Maiboku, the sacred land of the toads. It takes a month to get there on foot. The entrance is protected by all types of genjutsu and then traps. The only other way is for me to summon one of the toad elders and have him use the unsummoning jutsu to get us there, but you would have to sign the toad contract for that, he said, clearly on edge. So? Father wouldn't have a problem with me signing a summoning contract, she said as she crossed her arms, clearly unimpressed. You still don't get it. If I take you there the right way according to the toad's laws, we won't get back until well after the exams are over. If I have you sign the contract and get one of the other toads to unsummon us there, then not only did I let you sign the contract without you being tested, but I'll be taking you there knowing full well that you don't have the chakra to be a summoner yet. To say nothing of letting you sign it without their permission, he stated with worry. Hanabi looked at him and thought for a moment before saying, So we are in a catch-22? Why can't you just summon them here and have them test me? Because with how little chakra you have, you will have to be taken to the summoner's room on Mount Maiboku to be tested. If you came from a lineage of a former toad summoner, then I could let you sign the contract and worry about the spirit journey to Mount Maiboku later. I've already checked your records and it doesn't list any Hyuga ever being a summoner, he stated with dread in his voice. Kakashi said, Why don't you summon one of the toads here and ask them about? They wouldn't have given you this task if you couldn't complete it. Naruto scratched his chin and thought, Well, if it could save me a bludgeoning, I guess I can try it. He bit his thumb and yelled, Summoning jutsu. A cloud of smoke filled the training ground and slowly dissipated. When the smoke cleared, a 8 feet tall yellow toad stood before them. He spoke slowly and said, Hi Naruto. Do you have any snacks? No, I don't have any snacks with me right now, Gamatsu. Look, I need your help. I need to know how to get someone who hasn't signed the toad contract to Mount Maiboku today, he said. He blinked a few times and said, I'll answer you. For some snacks. Won't you take an IOU for now? I'm in a hurry, he asked in an almost begging manner. I'm hungry now though, he told him. Naruto hung his head. Fine, I'll get you some damn snacks. Naruto returned some time later with 2 clones with their arms full of junk food. They dumped the food in a huge pile in front of the yellow toad. He licked his chops and opened one of the bags of chips and devoured the whole bag in one bite. He kept devouring the food at a disturbing rate. Hanabi eyed Gamatsu with a look of disgust and said, And I thought Naruto's table manners were bad. Okay, I got you food, now tell me how to get Hanabi to Mount Maiboku today without endangering my life, he said. Gamatsu continued eating like he wasn't there. Hey! Gamatsu, Naruto said as he jumped up on him. He had his foot on his snout and his hands around his arm that was trying to stuff food into his mouth. Why you stop me from eating? He said slowly. You gotta tell me how to get Hanabi to Mount Maiboku. That was the deal, he yelled at him. Gamatsu blinked at him a few times before saying, I don't know. What? He said in offense and clubbed him right between the eyes. Gamatsu was unfazed by his strike. So can I finish eating now? He asked. Naruto got down off him and mumbled loudly, No good, lousy toad. Naruto sat down on the ground while Gamatsu continued eating at a revolting pace. What are we going to do now? She said while inching away from the large toad. I don't know. I could try summoning another toad, but I don't know if that's going to get us anywhere, he said in dismay. Why not summon bigger one like Gamabunta? She asked hopefully. Naruto gave her a strained look. You've never met Gamabunta, have you? He's not the friendliest of toads, especially when you don't have a good reason to summon him. I'll try to summon a toad that's a lot easier to get along with. Summoning jutsu, he said and slammed his hand into the ground. Again the training ground filled with smoke. This time he summoned an orange toad. Hi Naruto, hey Gamatsu. What are you doing pigging out without me? He yelled at his brother. Hanabi didn't think it was possible, but Gamatsu began eating even fast to keep his snacks from his brother. That's not important right now, Gamakichi. I need to know how to get Hanabi to mount my Boku today without breaking any of the toad laws, he said. Oh, that, I'll tell you for some snacks, Gamakichi said with an evil twinkle in his eye. ERGH. Naruto yelled and started pulling his hair out. You guys are going to drive me insane today. Sometime later Naruto returned in a foul mood with still more snacks and dumped them in front of him. He happily dug in and ate in an only slightly less revolting manner. You had better have an answer other than I don't know, he warned him. Gamakichi talked through a full mouth while showing partly chewed food. No, I have an answer. Just let me finish my snacks first. Naruto's eyes narrowed at him while he finished his food. Gamakichi finally swallowed the last bag of snack and said, Whoa, that was good. Come on already, I don't have all day, he said irritatedly. Oh right, he said as he grabbed his brother by the arms. Ask Dad, he said as he and his brother unsummoned themselves. Ah, what the hell? He yelled so loudly people could hear him miles away. It took Naruto more than a few minutes to calm down after being cheated twice. He finally steeled his nerves and drew in a huge amount of chakra. Summoning jutsu, he said. The entire training ground filled with smoke. It took much longer for it to clear and Hanabi got her first look at the toad she had read about in the books about Naruto. The clay-colored toad was over 150 feet tall from his sitting position. He was nearly as big as the Hokage Tower. He wore a blue robe and had a pipe in his mouth bigger than most elder trees. Here was the toad that hadn't been ridden on since the 4th Hokage until Naruto won his respect. This was Naruto's Mount Toad and the largest member of the Toad clan, Gamabunta. Hanabi was in stunned silence at the sheer size of the creature. Even her storybooks didn't do injustices. Naruto yelled up at him. Hey Gamabunta! I need your help. He looked down at him and said, Yes, I know. Gamakichi told me everything. So you know how to get to Mount Maiboku without breaking any of the toad laws? He asked him loudly. Yes, I'll tell you, fare's some snacks, he said calmly. Naruto's face faulted into the pavement. What the hell? There's no way I could feed you, he said, instantly getting to his feet while pointing a quivering finger at him. Gamabunta rolled over on his back with a thundering crash while laughing. Ha 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 ha, Gamakichi told me to tell you that. His voice boomed. Yeah, laugh it up. Naruto wait for him to calm down. So are you going to help me or not, Boss Toad? He asked. Gamabunta got down low to eye him. This isn't a very smart idea to bring her to Mount Maiboku, Naruto. I hope you know that and are prepared for what might happen, he warned. Yeah, I know what I'm getting myself into, he said as he crossed his arms. For your sake, I hope so. To get her there you will need our toad scent on her and use the unsummoning jutsu while concentrating on where you want to go on Mount Maiboku, he told him. How do we get your scent? He asked, and already he regretted it. Hork! Gamabunta spit a huge glop of saliva on Hanabi. Hanabi went from being held in awe at the great toad to utter revolting shock while holding her arms out to her sides like someone had clocked her in the head. She was so stunned by this indignity she couldn't even speak. You gross Gamabunta! Naruto said in disgust as he took a step back from her as she dripped. I never said it was a preferred way to get there, but it's the only way she can get there today, he said. How do I do the unsummoning jutsu though? He yelled up at him. Just do the summoning signs backwards and say unsummoning jutsu, he replied as he disappeared into a huge cloud of smoke. Naruto did well not to laugh at Hanabi's priceless expression of her looking like a white blob. He inched close to her and carefully touched her foot with his, as it was about the only place not covered in the toad's spit. He slowly went through the hand signs backwards and said, "Unsummoning Jutsu." They disappeared. Kakashi happily left with his camera in hand to go get his new pictures developed. Naruto had been concentrating hard on one of the training grounds on Mount Maiboku, but didn't quite make it there. Naruto and the glob-covered Hanabi appeared 20 feet over one of the many hot springs on the mountain. They screamed as they fell into the water with a loud splash. "Oh, great place to land, right in Gamabunta's toilet. I guess I won't tell Hanabi that part though," he thought. They both slow dragged themselves to the shore, panting well on the bright side. At least it washed the scent off of you, he said breathlessly. Hanabi was trying to catch her breath as well as she looked over at him and said, "I'm starting to hate toads." After Naruto used a wind jutsu to dry them off, Hanabi looked around the area. It was the strangest place she had ever seen. Hot springs were everywhere. The rock terrain had many weird-looking giant, hollow roots growing out of the rocks that were shooting water out of them into the hot springs. The rocks were covered in a bright green moss and there were small shrubs all over the place. The air was humid and hard to breathe. "Where are we?" she asked Naruto. Naruto looked around and said, "It looks like we are in the southern hot springs area of Mount Maiboku. It's not far from the training ground where I learned to throw the Raisin Shuriken. It's so strange here, but it's really pretty," she said, gazing around while listening to all the insects flutter about. "I keep forgetting you spent most of your time at the Hyuga compound. It just looks like an area in the wilds to me," Naruto said casually. "I guess I just don't get out much," she replied knowingly. Naruto headed off in a northern direction. "Come on, let's go. We are about 2 hours away from the Toad Village." They entered an open field area near a bunch of short mountain tops sometime later. 3 of the mountain had the tops of them cut clean off. "So this is the training ground you were talking about?" she asked. "Yeah, this is it. I snuck out here to train away from the elder toads during my sage training," he said while walking. She gave him a concerned look and asked, "How hard is sage training?" Naruto shook his head, not really knowing what to say. "It sounds easy, but when you try to harness the natural energies around you for the first time, you will see it's one of the hardest things you could ever do. You can easily die from it even under the care of one of the sage elders." Hanabi's eyes went wide before she mastered herself. "Naruto, please stop. I need to speak with you," she said with resolve. Naruto stopped and turned to her. He had never seen her so serious. Hanabi got on her knees and bowed before him. Naruto gave her a confused look as she did this. "Naruto, if I am a toad type, please take me as your disciple and teach me the ways of the toad sage," she asked formally. Naruto blinked a few times in surprise before asking her, "Gaara told you, didn't he?" She bowed even lower and said, "Yes, he did. I know you have to pass on your teaching soon. Please, Naruto, I'll work as hard as I can to learn from you." Naruto was humbled by her gesture and grabbed her by the shoulders and brought her back to her feet. He hugged her fiercely and said, "That's all I could have ever hoped for." He let her go after a long moment and told her, "We have to go see the sage elder to get you tested first. Let's go so we can make it before nightfall. It's not safe to be out here after dark," he told her. "What comes out here after dark?" she asked curiously. "You see how big Gamabunta is, right? Well, there are bugs here big enough to fill even his stomach that only come out at night. The village is one of the few safe places from them," he said. It took them quite a while to traverse the rugged land and finally make it to Toad Village. The village was in a huge valley area nestled in the mountain tops with several giant hot springs as big as small lakes. There were houses varying sizes, from houses that barely came up to her waist to ones that were as big as temples that littered the landscape. Many of the smaller houses were built right into the side of the rocky mountain tops. Most of the larger houses were built on the flatter area near the bottom of the valley. A thin misty fog hung low on the ground, making it look like they were walking on the clouds, and the air was filled with the sounds of croaking toads. "This has to be one of the prettiest places I ever seen," she said in awe. "It's like living in a fairy tale book." "This is the sacred village of the toads," he said, pointing his arm out over the vast landscape. After a long moment that he let her enjoy the view, he said, "Come on. Gamabunta's house is over by the biggest spring." He led her down the rock paths to the largest house in the valley. "Looks like he's in the spring. Hey Gamabunta!" he yelled out over the water. The large toad came up from the bottom of the spring, and a great waterfall streamed off his back, filling the area with steam. Hanabi choked and coughed, unable to breathe the thick air. "I see you made it," he told Naruto. "Yeah, we did. Can you tell me where the elder sages are?" he yelled back at him. Gamabunta raised one eyebrow at him and stated, "They are right behind you." Naruto turned around, and the last thing he remembered seeing was Fukasaku's wooden staff coming at him and hearing the distinct bong of Shima's frying pan before his world faded to black. "I'll get Naruto. You take care of this girl," Fukasaku said as he picked Naruto up on his tiny shoulders and carried/dragged him away. Shima yelled at Gamabunta. "You were the one that helped him bring this girl here, weren't you? I told him he had better be prepared for what would happen," Gamabunta stated as he looked away. Shima turned around in disgust with him. "Come on you," she said to Hanabi in an annoyed tone. Naruto awoke 2 hours later in a small, dim hut covered in a moss blanket inside the elder sage's home. His head was still stinging. He looked around the blurry room and could just make out Hanabi's outline sitting next to one of the toad elders. He couldn't tell which of them it was before. "Honey! He's waking up!" Fukasaku yelled to his wife. He could just make out the pitter-patter of little feet racing toward him before another loud bong hit him, knocking him out again. "Call my food bad!" she yelled at the knocked-out sage. 2 hours later, bong. 2 more hours later, and Naruto awoke with his head hurting like hell from his none to gentle forced naps. He wrapped the covers over the 4 lumps on his head and started healing himself with his chakra. "Kami, what's got them this upset?" "I followed Gamabunta instructions," he said through the ringing in his ears. It took him what seemed like forever to heal the lumps enough to bear the pain. When he could finally stand, he took the covers off his head and looked around. A pot of foul-smelling bug soup was boiling next to the fireplace, and the hut was empty. Where could they have gone? He thought. Hanabi was following Fukasaku through a winding mountain path heading down the mountain. "Is Naruto in trouble?" she asked in a reserved manner. "That's none of your concern, girl," he said coldly. "Then where are you taking me?" she asked. "Off of the Toad's sacred land. Naruto had no right to bring you here," he said shortly. Hanabi stopped in her tracks. "What?" "I wouldn't dawdle if I were you. There are dangerous things out here at night," he stated as he turned around to look at her. "Like hell you're leading me off the mountain, Buster." She walked right up to the small toad man and poked him right in the chest. Fukasaku was clearly surprised that she did this. "Look here, I got spit on by a giant toad, dropped in a boiling hot spring, had to walk for 2 hours and watch you beat up my master. I came here to get my chakra tested to see which animal I can summon, and that is what I'm going to do." "You got it," she said angrily. He never moved her finger off of him and replied, "Do you even know who I am, little human girl?" he said. "You're one of the 2 toad sage elders, and I'm guessing you're not the brighter of the 2. She spat. "She's got guts threatening me, I'll give her that." He thought. Who says we didn't already test your chakra? We don't even need to test your chakra. It's far too low for you to even be considered to join the Toad clan." He yelled at her. "I'm going back to Naruto, and I will go through you if I have to," she stated loudly. "Ha ha ha, that's a good one. I haven't heard one that funny in over 100 years. Come on and take your best shot, little lady," he said as he laughed again. "Byakugan." she said as she got into a fighting pose. She quickly saw that this tiny toad was much more than he seemed. Not only did he have so much chakra that it made her eyes water to look at him, but he was constantly drawing chakra into himself. Well, come on, little lady. If you're going to try to take me on, hurry up already. I'm not getting any younger, he stated. Hanabi steeled herself. Multi-shadow clone jutsu, she said, and summoned 3 clones. Her mind shifted to the spirit realm. Fukasaku was standing in the middle of the yin-yang symbol, and her 3 clones were surrounding him. She grinned ever so slightly. You're in range. Her and her clones moved quickly toward him. 4 palms. Just before Hanabi touched him, he leaped so high into the air that he disappeared. Damn, I lost him. How can he do that? I had him locked on, she thought as she looked to the skies for him. Impressive. She summoned 3 clones with such little chakra and has even learned to fight in perfect timing, but I'm no mere human. She will have to do much better than that if she wants to get past me, he thought. From high in the clouds he drew chakra into himself and concentrated. Air bullet jutsu, he yelled and sent 4 air bullets screaming down to earth. Hanabi couldn't see the Toadman anymore and had switched to a defensive stance. She was focusing on the parameter, waiting for him to break it. Not a second later she heard and felt the jutsu coming at her. Her and her 3 clones all move as one. Rotation. They spun, releasing chakra form every point in their bodies. Her and 2 of her clone dissipated 3 of the air bullets in a howling whine, but one of her clones could only cancel it out before poofing into smoke. Flashback. Hanabi and her father were sparring at the Hokage training ground. She had decided to try a new move she had read about. She charged her father and preformed a flying jump kick. Lord Hyuga barely touched her foot while she was in mid-air that was coming at him, and it sent her spinning wildly and she crashed to the ground hard. Hanabi! He scowled her. How many times do I have to tell you? Fighting is about balance. We never let our feet leave the ground during combat. In the air you weigh nothing, and it only takes the slightest of touches to unbalance you. Where did you learn such a stupid move? He yelled at her. Flashback ends. Hanabi stretched her mind out in all directions and found the chakra that once looked like a star in the dusky sky plummeting toward her. I have to hit him before he touches the ground, she told herself. He screamed toward the ground at great speed, just inches before landing. Now! Hanabi told herself and attacked. She struck him in the foot, knocking him into a spin, heading for the ground. 4 palm. Her clone said, and struck 4 times, sending him flying into the other clone while charging him. 8 palms. The second clone said, striking him 4 times as the second came up behind him and struck him another 4. The real Hanabi yelled 16 palm, as she joined her clones in the melee, with them all striking the small toad body in quick succession. 32 palm. All 3 of them yelled as they went full out on the tiny toad in a rapid exchange. When it was over, her and her 3 clones were holding the Toadman up in a 3-way strike to the neck. Hanabi was breathing hard as her 2 clones poofed away and the toad slipped off her hand and collapsed to the ground unconscious. She panted hard for many moments. I think I used up almost all my chakra in that attack. I can hardly move, and that was just an old toad, she thought, trying to catch her breath. She heard a strange clacking noise from the nearby shrubs, and a 10 feet long brown beetle emerged from the undergrowth. Hanabi still hadn't had time to rest when it yelled an inhuman battle cry and charged her. I don't have much chakra left, I'll have to make this strike count, she told herself as she stepped in between the tiny toad on the ground and the charging insect. The giant armored bug charged at her as she stilled her mind for her attack. Raff! The bug screamed as it charged her. Just when it came within striking distance, bearing a giant pincers, she hit it in the middle of the forehead. It skidded, though the dirt on its back has twitched several times. Hanabi hit her knees, panting. She took several sharp breaths before hearing the loud scamper of more giant bugs. 2 have to get out of here. I don't have any chakra left. I can't end up as bug food, she told herself as she strained to push herself back to her feet. She started moving as fast as her slow body would carry her back up the path when she heard several more of the giant beetle's battle screams heading toward her. She turned to see the prone Toadman. He was knocked out with his long tongue hanging out to the side of his mouth. I can hardly hold myself up. I can't afford to take him with me, she warred with herself. Another bug battle cry echoed through the mountains in a much louder voice. She just couldn't take leading the Toadman to die. She cringes as she staggered back over to him and strained to lift his tiny body onto her back. She took in several more sharp breaths and said, "Well, we are probably both going to die here, but I'll try my best to get us back to safety." She managed to struggle up the harsh mountain path for just over 500 meters before collapsing near a large tree. The horrible sounds of the giant bugs grew closer and closer. It was all she could do to try to hide the small toad in a bush beside the tree before the bugs rounded the bend and caught sight of her. She braced her back against the tree while she drew a kunai from her holster. She tried to run chakra through the blade, but didn't have any left. She waited for her inevitable fate. 14 of the giant bugs charged her with their screams filling her head as the ground shook her body. They were mere feet from her when she closed her eyes and waited for death to take her. The wait seemed like forever. The noise of the bug had seemed to stop. Crunch munch crunch, she opened her eyes to see a toad so large it could only be Gamabunta. Man, that hit the spot. I haven't a feast of brownbacks in years, he said. She was finally safe and slipped into a deep sleep. Gamabunta said as he turned around. I'll be, if it isn't that Hanabi girl, he said, and his eyes curiously inspected her hand that was holding the hand of a small green toad that was sticking out of a bush. The great toad used his massive tongue to move the small plant. Well, I'll be. That senile toad probably got lost. I guess I'll take them to the chakra testing rooms. It's not safe for a human out here at night. Gamabunta scooped them up into his mouth and jumped back to the village in a single supersonic hop through the skies. Gamabunta landed so hard that he shook the ground in a small earthquake. He carefully deposited the old toad and the sleeping Hanabi outside a small circular hut on the top of a mountain. Hanabi's back was resting against the hut and the elder toad sage was sitting beside her. There, they should be safe here. Now back to hunting for some dessert, he said as he leaped away. Fukasaku opened his eyes and smiled. Even though she doesn't have the chakra she needs to be a toad sage, she certainly has shown enough loyalty and guts to be tested, he thought as he slowly tried to move out from under her arms. She said in her sleep and hugged the small toadman fiercely, causing several loud pops to emit from his body. 5 more minutes, Naruto. Can we just stay like this for a few more minutes, please? Ouch! What strength she has in her arms for a human, he thought as he gently but firmly tried to remove her arms from him. Sometime later he managed to get away from the snuggle-hungry teen's arms and carefully moved her into the small hut. There was nothing in the dim room but 12 statues around the outer wall of spirit animals. He laid her in the center of the stone floor and placed his hands on her chest. He began drawing her chakra out of her and into his hand. The chakra formed a beam of light coming out of the top of his hand that shined towards 2 of the statues. The fainter of the 2 beams of light shined on the statue of the turtle. The brightest of the beams shone on the statue of the toad. Strange, he thought to himself. I've only heard of a few other cases where someone's chakra leaned toward 2 types of animals. Hanabi awoke on a cold, damp floor with Fukasaku leaning over her some time later. I see you're finally awake, he said. She blinked away her blurry vision and sat up. Where am I? She asked in a sleepy manner. You're in the chakra testing hut here in the Toad Village, he told her. She tilted her head at him and asked, So we aren't dead then? Ha ha ha. Heavens no, child, he said as she got to her feet. She looked around the bleak hut and asked, What happened? How did we get here? The last thing I remember is nearly getting eaten by giant bugs. There will be time for that later, First I need you to answer some questions," he said in a serious tone. She wore a confused look and asked, "About how I beat you?" The old toad gave her a thoughtful grin and snickered. "No, not about your gentle fist art. I already know quite a bit about that. I need to ask you if you're a chakra stealer type as well," he said. She stared at him blankly and after a long moment of thought replied, "No, I don't have any chakra stealing jutsu. We in the Leaf Village frown upon that kind of jutsu." Then how is it that when I tested your chakra animal type, that yours leans toward two animals then?" he asked her carefully. "Wait, what? You tested my animal type? When? I thought you were intent on beating the hell out of Naruto and throwing me off your lands." She bombarded him. He nodded his head at her and said, "Yes, I was going to evict you from our lands. You haven't earned the right to be here yet, but that was before you tried to protect me from the bugs when you thought I was out cold," he said. "Wait, you mean you weren't knocked out? You were playing possum?" she said in accusing shock. "I'd like to call it testing you. You failed on one hand for attacking me, but you succeeded in gaining my respect for what followed," he said. "You!" she yelled angrily as she pointed at him. "You had me carry you that far thinking I was going to die a horrible death by getting eaten by bugs just to test me." He smiled at her with his arms folded behind his back before saying, "Exactly. I had to know what type of person you really were. You can talk to a person all you want, but only when the situation is dire do they show their true self." She glared at him and crossed her arms before bluntly asking, "So then, what animal type am I?" He raised his eyebrows at her. "Cammy, she's nearly as hot-headed as Naruto was," he thought. "I don't know. The test was inconclusive. That's why I asked if you were a chakra stealer," he said. She threw her hands up and said, "What does that have to do with anything? Because this test always shows us one animal, not two. The only way it would show two is if you had someone else's chakra inside of you. There's only two ways to mess with the results of this test. One is to have someone else's chakra inside of you. The other can only happen with females when they are with child," he told her firmly. She face-faulted. "Wait, I'm not pregnant with Naruto's child," she said very defensively. He gave her a sour look and said, "I know that. I hope you realize I'm the one that taught Naruto how to use chakra sensory perception. If you were with his child, I would have sensed it the moment you got here." She relaxed and put her hand over her heart. "Oh, sorry about that then," she said slightly, embarrassed as she looked at the floor, clearly flushed. I think I might still have some of Naruto's chakra inside me," she stammered. He peered at her curiously and asked, "I thought you weren't a chakra stealer though?" "I'm not. Naruto has a technique to force his chakra inside of someone else to refill their chakra levels. It is how he managed to teach me most of the shadow clone jutsu in 2 days," she admitted. He nodded his head at her. "I see. How long ago did he do this for you and how many times?" he asked. She got a strained expression and said, "It was over a month ago. He refilled me over 70 or so times from almost no chakra back to over full in 2 days." "Ribbit, over 70 times? That would explain why there is still some of his chakra inside you. Our chakra test is useless then. It would probably be a year before you are free enough from his chakra so that we could test you this way," he stated. Her eyes went wide. "No, I can't wait that long. Naruto can't wait that long to teach the next Toad Sage," she said desperately. "I'm well aware of Naruto's predicament. I'm taking you to the head of our clan," he said as he turned to walk out of the hut. "How will that help?" she asked as she followed him. "You talk too much. Just be quiet and follow. You do well to listen and pay attention to the toads if you want to become part of our clan," he told her. Naruto walked outside the elder's hut. The valley and the mountains had fog sticking to the ground in the full moonlight. The sky was littered brightly with stars, and the black of night was starting to fade to red in the east. It's almost dawn. I don't sense her anywhere near here, and I'm too weak to use Sage Mode to increase my range to find her, he thought. He went down to Gamabunta's house that was nearby only to hear him snoring loudly. Naruto knew waking him up would be a very, very bad idea, so he turned to leave. "Hey Naruto," Gamakichi said as he hopped into view from behind the massive house. "What are you doing up so early?" "Oh hi. I was looking for Hanabi," he said. "Pop said he dropped her and Fukasaku off at the statue shrine hut hours ago before he turned in for the night," he said. Naruto's mood brightened and he said, "Thanks Gamakichi." He turned to leave and took 2 steps away, then he turned right back around and asked, "Where is the statue shrine?" "Honestly, I don't know," he said quietly. Naruto fell over. "What did you mean you don't know? You've lived here your whole life," he nearly shouted at him. The toad wore a confused look and said, "It's not like we have to be tested to know which clan we belong to. It's pretty obvious when we are born. I've never been there, so I don't know where it is," he said. Naruto hung his head and sighed. "Great! It will take forever to find her just wandering around. You should go see the Great Geezer Sage. I heard he is going to want to see you anyway," he said. Naruto picked up his head and shrugged his shoulders. "I guess it's as good a place as any to look." Fukasaku led her for what seemed like forever on a winding trail up the tallest peak of the mountain. For the longest time the fog was so thick she could barely see until they had finally risen above the fog. What she had thought was mere fog was clouds they had been walking through. A vast ocean of puffy white clouds stretched as far as her eyes could see as they neared the top of the mountain. They reached a small plateau at the top where a short path led to a large temple-like structure made of ancient stone that had been weathered through the ages. "No gawking. Hurry up," Fukasaku told the befuddled girl, and she quickened her pace. The temple was much smaller than it looked. Inside were a few younger toad females tending to the plants and a large wrinkly toad sitting on a throne-like chair. He led them through the open room and stood in front of the squinting old toad. "Great Geezer, I have come to you so that you can settle a matter of someone trying to join our clan," he said stiffly. The old toad towered above Hanabi and leaned over to get a better look at her. "Who is this human girl?" he asked in a raspy voice. "She is little Naruto's student, Hanabi Hyuga. He brought her here to get animal tested. Unfortunately, Naruto fed her his chakra, making the test inconclusive," he stated. The old toad gave him a blank stare and asked, "Who is this Naruto person?" Hanabi gave Fukasaku a questioning look and he wiped his face with his hand in exasperation. "Little Naruto is the child of Destiny Grand Geezer and he's our sage in the human world. Don't you remember him?" he asked. The old toad took several long moments to think before saying, "Is he the perverted man with white hair?" "No, that was his master Jiraiya. Naruto has spiky yellow hair," he said as he shook his head. "What happened to Jiraiya then?" he asked slowly. "He perished in battle years ago. Don't you remember? It was just after that we trained Naruto to be a sage," he said, clearly feeling like he was getting nowhere. "Spiky yellow hair, right?" he said in thought. "Yes, great sage," Fukasaku said with a nod. "I think I remember him. Didn't he get killed fighting a fox?" he asked. The elder sage took a long deep breath. "No, that was his father Minato." Hanabi leaned over and quietly asked the elder, "Are you sure this is your great elder toad sage? He sounds kind of—" "Yes, this is him. He is a little forgetful at times," he replied absent-mindedly. Hanabi stared at him and said, "A little? Are you sure he even knows his name? He looks like he is over 100 years old." The great elder toad sage smiled down at her, which kind of unnerved her for a moment. "I'm starting to like this girl. She is kind to compliment me so." Hanabi turned and gave the elder a confused look and he said, The Grand Geezer is over 1,000 years old, child. She wore a shocked look and asked, Then how old are you? He gave her a chuckle and said, I'm 837 years young. She slowly absorbed the knowledge. Then how old is Gamabunta? Like 2,000? No, Gamabunta is only 64 years old. Just because he's the largest toad doesn't mean he's the oldest, he replied. Fukasaku proceeded to tell the great sage who Hanabi was another 4 times before the doors to the temple opened up with a loud creak. Shima and Naruto, with a fresh lump on his head, entered the building. Shima had a frying pan in her hand and Naruto looked over at her apologetically. Look, I said I was sorry. Can you just stop giving me the cold shoulder already? He pleaded. I'm never going to feed you again. You can starve. Call my cooking bad, she said as she crossed arms and looked away from him. It's not your cooking, it's your ingredients, he muttered aloud with a revolted look on his face. Who is this child again, Fukasaku? The great elder sage asked. He drew in a sharp breath and sighed. I've told you 5 times now. She is Naruto's student and we need to know what her chakra animal is. Naruto quickly walked up next to Hanabi and the elder toad. Yo Wrinkles, how have you been? He asked the Grand Geezer. The old toad peered down at him. I remember you, Naruto, I've had a vision of you recently. Another one? I thought you only had one per clan member. What was this vision? He asked curiously. You will meet a young girl with white eyes that is far from blind. You will take this girl as your pupil, he said. That's already happened, great sage. She's standing right here. Her name is Hanabi, he said while pointing at her. The great elder sage continued like he had never spoke. You will go through a great ordeal to test your abilities. That too has already happened. It's how we got here, he yelled. During this ordeal you will be cheated out of snacks. Twice, the old toad said. Naruto sighed, hung his head before saying, That has also already happened. You will bring her before me and then you will begin training her in our ways. I see you training her here at Mount Myaboku for some time, he said. Naruto jumped for joy. Woohoo! I've got a toad disciple. The great toad continued speaking but was drowned out by his own rumbling death. Fukasaku and Shima wore a look of utter terror. Quick, run! They yelled together. Naruto and Hanabi looked over at them and he said, What? Suddenly there was a horrendous reverberating sound and a huge green gale filled the room. The force of it blew them out of the temple with hurricane-like winds. Naruto managed to catch Hanabi in flight before they hit the ground and rolled a few times. Naruto was holding a dazed Hanabi while a dangerous-smelling green cloud wafted out of every opening on the temple. He instantly got to his feet and angrily shouted back at the temple. Ah, come on! I brought a lady! Can't you pick a better time to let one go than now? Naruto turned back to Hanabi whose head was swooning from the toxic smell. He shook her. Come on, Hanabi-chan. Wake up! Hanabi-chan, he said loudly as her limp head flopped on her shoulders. The 2 elders managed to get out on the other side of the temple and looked at each other worriedly. He was too happy about finding a Toad Sage student that he didn't hear the last part of the great elder Toad Sage's vision. Fukasaku said, I think it's best that he doesn't hear that part of the vision, not yet anyway. I'll send a toad to Tsunade and tell her the good news about Hanabi, Shima said. 4 days later. It was a clear, cool morning at the Hokage Tower. Tsunade was sitting at her desk with a steaming cup of tea while going over her usual mountain of paperwork. A small toad carrying a scroll in its mouth jumped up on one of the towering stacks of paperwork and croaked loudly to announce his presence. She set the sheet of paper she was reading down and rolled her eyes at the small toad. As if I don't have enough to do, she said as she took the scroll from the small toad and it hopped away leaving a sizable wet mark on her paperwork. Filthy toad, she mumbled and opened the scroll. She took a few moments to slowly go over what it said. Summon Kazekage Gaara at once. She told an umbu by the door and went back to her work. The umbu bowed slightly and disappeared into smoke. Sometime later she heard. Lady Hokage, Kazekage Gaara is here as you requested. She leaned back in her chair and said, "Let him in." Gaara came in and stood before her. "What news is there about Naruto and Hanabi?" he asked her. "It seems your final test really did push him. He got her to mount Myaboku and she was tested to see what animal her chakra leans towards," she said. "And?" he asked carefully. "They still aren't sure, but they are going to train her anyway. They don't have high hopes she will master or survive the training, and certainly not before the final test of the exams," she said. "That makes 24 ninjas that made it to the final round. That is still too many to have the one-on-one combat before the other Kages," he said. Tsunade sighed loudly and said, "Yes it is, but with Naruto away training Hanabi we can't have any preliminary rounds to thin their numbers. Then they all must participate in the final round. We will have to hold the last round over 2 or 3 days. I hope the other Kages will agree to this," Gaara said quietly. "I don't think they will like it, but I don't see them giving us much trouble on the matter. I think 3 days is preferable," she said. "Then 7 matches total a day? That sounds reasonable," he said. Tsunade stood up and said, "Then let's inform the others that the second task is over and it's time for the match selection." The squads that passed were all summoned to a large open room with a second story railing around it. Again they were formed up into rows and they waited. In the back of the room was a blank screen. Gaara entered the room from a side door and stood before the screen as silence slowly filled the room. "Congratulations on passing the second part of the exams," he said loudly. Udon whispered to Konohamaru. "Where's Naruto?" "There is no way he failed," he whispered back. "One of the squads that passed cannot make it back for the selection process due to the difficulty of their last task. This is Squad 7 of the Land of Fire. They do however forfeit the knowledge of who they will be fighting in the final task because of this. After you are matched to your opponent you will have 2 weeks to train for your fights. We have also decided to section out the final task out over 3 days with the most capable ninjas fighting on the last day," he said as the screen lit up and started choosing the matches at random. This went on for some time as he announced the matches. The first fight for day 3 is Takia the Water Monk vs Hanabi Hyuga. The screen again started going through names. "Ouch, I don't envy Hanabi. I heard most of the nobles want to see Takia and Naruto in the very last match. Only a few names were left. Konohamaru, Matsuri and Naruto were among them." The tension in the room could be cut with a knife as the screen stopped on the first name, Konohamaru. "Yeah. Come on, give me Naruto," Konohamaru yelled disruptively as the screen kept going through names. "That guy actually wants to fight the great sage? Is he nuts?" one ninja said. "That's his student. Of course he wants to fight his master," a leaf ninja replied. Konohamaru eyed the screen intently until it stopped on the name Kimdo. "Ah damn! I have to fight a girl to get to Naruto," Konohamaru said in disappointment. Again the board lit up going through names. Matsuri looked at the screen in dread. The names for Fight 3 would determine the combatant's last fight for the day as well. The board eventually settled on the names Valiak and Sormanami. The color drained from Matsuri's face as the board flashed the final pair for the last fight. Naruto Uzumaki vs Matsuri. Konohamaru walked over to Matsuri with a smile on his face after Gaara dismissed everyone and said, "Good luck fighting Naruto, and you better save some of him for me." Yes, I will," she stammered nervously. Gaara and Matsuri were in their small room near the river. Gaara was doing some research on what to train Matsuri on for her upcoming match while she waited quietly. "A master?" she asked shyly. "Yes, what do you need?" he said, never taking his eyes off what he was reading. Did you by chance fix the match with me and Naruto? She asked carefully. He set his book down and turned to face her. No, you only had a 1 in 8 chance to fight him. I did, however, put your name forth for the final day. I am pleased with it, but I didn't fix the matches that way. I am relieved you did not get matched with Takia. He said. Why? How does he compare to Naruto? She stated. He doesn't, but he has a jutsu you could not defend against, and he will most certainly use it during the final fights. He is not called a hero for nothing, he said as he went back to his work. Matsuri only became more nervous and uneasy while shifting uncomfortably in place. Naruto was sitting at a small table with Hanabi and the elder toads. Hanabi was trying to force herself to eat the revolting bug soup she was served while Naruto argued with Fukasaku. Come on, why can't we use the toad oil on her like you did for me? He said. There is simply too much chakra in the oil for her to handle. It would overwhelm her and turn her into a stone frog. She needs much more chakra if she's even going to attempt it. Fukasaku stated in that's final tone. Naruto wrinkled up his eyebrows at him and then looked up and rubbed his chin. And if she had the chakra? He said suggestively. Hanabi dropped her chopsticks and stared blankly at him. I thought Tsunade told you not to use that jutsu on her again. He warned him. What she doesn't know won't hurt her. He said suggestively. I'm sorry, Naruto. I will not allow you to use that jutsu. On the bright side, she is a lot farther than you were at stilling her mind. Be thankful for that. She may not even need the oil. He replied. But you said that could take years. He yelled in protest. He sighed and said, Naruto, I've been training sages long before you were born. I know what I'm doing. You cannot rush this, not with her. Just trust me on this matter. He said empathetically. Naruto crossed his arms in defeat. You know what you're doing, all right. You've been scoffing off your chore of doing the dishes for 80 years. Shima snapped at him. Would you shut up, you crabby old toad? He yelled back at her. Me crabby? What about you? You saggy layabout. She said and hurled her soup at him. He barely dodged it and threw a large beetle on the half-shell back at her, the 8th food fight since they got there ensued. Naruto sighed and Hanabi quickly took the opportunity to dump her soup right on Naruto's head to be rid of the stuff. Naruto gave her a sour look as bug guts dripped off his head and Hanabi gave him fake a look of innocence. Come on you. It's time for training. He said as he led her out of the food fight and the HUD dripping all the way. She snickered quietly and followed. Start song. He led her to an area with hundreds of toad statues near a cliff that had a waterfall of tan-looking liquid falling into a large pool. In the center of the pool was a toad statue holding a giant leaf and the tan liquid was showing it on its back. That stuff smells rancid. Can't we train at the other cliffs like yesterday? She said while holding her nose. Naruto wore a very serious look and said no. I want you to look out at all these toad statues. She looked at all of them and walked around a few to examine them closer. Naruto followed her and said, each one of these statues was once like us. They failed to become sages and turned into statues. This is the danger of trying to harness the natural chakra around you if you fail to control it. If you lose control, that you will turn into a stone toad. You will die. Hanabi was stunned and carefully removed her hand from the statue she was touching while staring at him in shock. So if I lose control even once, I'll turn into one of these? She asked in disbelief. Yes. That's why just anyone can't be a sage. Most of them die trying to harness that power. He told her as he stared into the deep blue sky and wind made his hair sway ever so slightly. The sheer determination in his eyes calmed her and held her in awe. You have to want this more than life to obtain it. You have to want this so badly that your desire for it goes beyond life or death. If death comes for you, will have to refuse it no matter how much it hurts. No matter how tired you are. No matter how much you want to give up. Tell me, Hanabi, why do you want to become a sage? What drives you? He said as he finally turned his eyes on her. The intensity of his gaze was something she had never seen in anyone's eyes. It both inspired her and made her feel like he could see every facet of her being. I just want to make you happy, to ease your pains and worries, to ease the scars that so few can see on you. I'd become anything for you if it would make you happy. She stammered slyly. Naruto looked back out into the sea of blue that was the sky and thought for a longing moment. So for love? Can that really be enough for you to survive? He asked himself more than her. He turned and walked back towards the pool of oil. I'm going to show you something. Something that you won't even need to use your Byakugan to see. He said slowly and purposely. He stopped and looked up at the stone toad being showed with oil that towered above him. He removed his trench coat and dropped it on the ground. He took off his shirt to reveal a thin blue chainmail shirt. His belt was the next thing that followed. Soon he was standing in nothing but his froggy boxer shorts. One day I hope you will be able to do this as well, and I hope you will understand how dangerous it is. One day I hope you will be able to sit on that toad with me. It's an indescribable feeling. He said like he was remembering something as he never took his gaze off of the stone toad's head. Hanabi was slightly confused, but intently wondered what he was about to do. He leaped on top of the stone toad. He slowly stepped into the oil that was falling down on the stone toad's back. He held his arms out and turned in a circle under the waterfall of oil. It coated his entire body and made every facet of his skin glimmer. Hanabi started feeling strange, like a tingle in her chest. She didn't know if it was fear for Naruto or intense curiosity. He walked back to the top of the stone toad's head and sat down in a meditation pose with his left hand up like he was praying with only one hand. A golden aura formed around his outline. The tingle in her chest expanded and the world started to slow down for her. The oil waterfall looked like a slow rain of giant droplets. She could see every pore and crack in the stone she was standing on. What's happening to me? She thought as her hand went instinctively to the original source of the tingle on her chest. I can feel so much that's around me. This is such a strange feeling. It feels better than a sugar rush. It feels like when Naruto fills me up with chakra, but 100 times better. Hanabi laughed a joyous laugh of awe and wonder while looking at everything with her new sight. Everything was so clear to her. She stopped when her eyes returned to Naruto. So beautiful, she said as she turned her gaze on him. Naruto was encased in a golden sphere of sage chakra that almost covered the head of the giant toad statues. He was in perfect harmony with all of nature. The chakra coming in and out of his body formed beautiful patterns that she never would have been able to follow even with her Byakugan. She smiled as her mouth stood slight agape as a tear rolled down each of her cheeks, and then she laughed. She took in several breaths watching him. Is this how you always feel, Naruto? She yelled up at him and laughed even louder. I feel like I could take on the world, she said as he raised her arms above her head. Naruto never moved. From above them on the cliff, Fukasaku stood over watching them with Shima. How is he doing that? Shima asked in a wonder. Hanabi she's almost in sage mode? He replied in disbelief. I can feel his sage chakra flowing into that girl and as well as maintaining it. How did he ever learn to do that? Naruto was deep in his own self-peace and remained absolutely still in his huge amount of sage chakra. She smiled a smile that radiated happiness and walked over to the edge of the pool of oil. Fukasaku's eyes went with horror. No! He moved so fast that he disappeared. He's not going to make it, Shima said as she shook her head as the ground. Hanabi yelled up at him. I'll come sit by you now, she said as Fukasaku appeared next to her and caught her by the arm. You can't go in that oil, child, you'll die, he said in a commanding voice. She smiled a giddy smile as she looked over at him and said, Watch me. Hanabi disappeared, leaving only a small cyclone of dust whirling on the ground where her feet were. Damn! Where did she go? Naruto's chakra is blinding my sensory ability, he thought angrily as he frantically looked for her. Hanabi reappeared behind the oil waterfall on the bottom of the statue's back. She laughed again and it echoed off the walls, making it sound like she was everywhere. "Hanabi! Where are you?" the elder yelled. Hanabi walked up the back of the statue and stopped with her face not even an inch from the flowing oil. She slowly snaked her head back and closed her eyes as she stretched her arms out to her sides. "Hanabi!" the elder yelled as he caught sight of her. She smiled even bigger and stepped into the failing oil. Large drops of oil hit her in the face and started soaking through her clothes as it flattened her hair with its weight. "Hana.bi," the elder said as he let his outstretched hand fall to his side. He gripped his tightly cane and turned his head to the side while looked down and wincing. "I failed," he thought. Hanabi mimicked Naruto. She stepped fully into the falling oil and spun around until her entire body was drenched while she laughed. "Foolish girl, she is killing herself right in front of me and there's nothing I can do. I can't disperse that much sage chakra in one with such little chakra. Another stone toad to show me I failed once again." He lamented in pain. Hanabi's world exploded like she had opened her eyes for the first time. She could sense and feel everything around her for miles. Every insect's fluttering wings, every blade of grass growing, every particle of mist in the air. She felt the most peaceful calm that was beyond her understanding or comprehension. She could feel Naruto, not just see him. She let out a slight giggle and stepped out of the raining oil. Her skin glimmered with the shine of the oil that only enhanced her beauty and happiness. She walked up the statue's back, dripping oil the whole way while heading slowly up to Naruto. The gleaming golden sage that was stilling her mind and making her heart leap for joy. She walked into his golden chakra sphere. It was warm and still, yet held the sheer determination of his being. It was then in his densest chakra she heard thoughts that were not her own. "Master, I've found my next student. I hope showing her this inspires her enough to get her through this insanely hard training." Hanabi got down on her knees at his right side. She slowly wrapped her arm around his shoulder. She ever so lightly dragged her fingers across his shoulders and they slid easily on his firm slippery skin. She moved her hand up and gently covered the left side of his face in her gentle touch. She moved her right hand and placed it in his left palm. As if two people were making one prayer sign. "Father, I hope I can keep the Toad Sage line going. I can't bear the thought of it ending with me. I'll give her anything I can to help her. My time, my wisdom, and even my chakra. I hope I can be half the master Jiraiya was to me." Hanabi had to hold back her tears of happiness as she leaned her face over to his. She radiated more than her happiness. She radiated her entire being to him. "Jiraiya, I'm really starting to like her. It's weird to tell you that about a student, but I can never return those feelings truly until I settle things with Ruby. I can't ever tell her until then we can't be together, but we can never be apart. I'm going to turn her into the next Toad Sage no matter what. You just watch me. You'll see, I'll make you proud." Shima appeared next to Fukasaku and elbowed him in the ribs to get his attention. He jumped with a start out of his self-loathing. He looked over at his wife and she just pointed at them in his golden chakra. He eyed them curiously. "Those marks," he said in disbelief. Naruto was sitting still with Hanabi's face on his. Slowly dark lines that started in a point appeared on the bottom of her cheeks. They traced up her white face, getting wider as it went, and finally encompassed her eyes. "It can't be, she hasn't even signed the contract yet," he said breathlessly. The dark line traced its way from her eyes up while receding in its thickness until it met in a point at the top center of her forehead and crossed ever so slightly. "And you were worried she wasn't a toad type?" Shima said to him with a smile. "But how? How did she enter sage mode?" "We just started training her," he said in wonder. "Can't you sense it? Their chakra is connected somehow," she said with a smile. Hanabi moved her fingers in between his and firmly held his hand. "I'm sure you will," she said while smiling. Naruto finally opened his eyes from her touch. "Hanabi? What are you doing up here? Where did you get all that chakra? What happened to you?" he asked as his hand traced the new marks on her face in wonder. You happened. She told him and put her head on his shoulder. Konohamaru had a traveling pack on at train ground 7 while Moegi and Udon were there to see him off. So you're really going to try it? Udon asked him. Yes, I am. Naruto took Hanabi for sage training. It's time I went to my own clan for training as well, he said with resolve. But didn't Naruto say sage training was very dangerous? Moegi said in concern. Yeah, toad sage training is, who knows, maybe monkey sage training is easier, he said with a shrug of his shoulders. But what if it's harder? Udon warned with worry in his heart. It doesn't matter if it's harder. Naruto is already so far ahead of me, and knowing him, he will only get stronger. I have to take this step if I ever want to become Hokage, he said with conviction. Take care of yourself, Konohamaru, Moegi said with a slight smile. Don't worry. I'll be back, he told her with a cheeky smile. It's just, you're our leader. What are we going to do without you? Udon said sadly. Konohamaru walked up and placed his hand on his should. Find your master and train Udon. Raichi was waiting for him. Are you all set? Yes, Raichi, he said as he turned away from Udon. The small monkey touched his shin and said, Unsummon Jutsu. They disappeared. You really think he's going to be okay? Udon asked Moegi. Come on, Udon, this is Konohamaru you talking about. I have faith in him, she said as she turned around to walk away. I guess so, he said, clearly not totally convinced. It was thick and humid day over the sacred monkey forest. A forest that stretched out as far as the eye could see in all directions in a sea of green. Konohamaru and Raichi appeared over the forest, over 200 feet above it, and started plummeting toward the trees. Oh! He screamed as he fell like a rock while flailing his arms and legs wildly. Raichi grabbed a branch and lightly flipped himself onto it. Konohamaru crashed into the tree tops, loudly sending leaves and birds flying in all directions. He was entangled in vines suspended 40 feet off the ground and unable to get out. Hey! Couldn't you have picked a better place to summon us to? Are you trying to kill us? He yelled. Humph, you complain too much. If you had trouble with that height, then you are far from being able to handle our fighting style, Raichi replied. Just get me down already, he yelled from the tangled vines as he struggled. Many hours later they were jumping from tree to tree in the dense forest. How big is this forest? Are we almost there yet? He complained. Raichi jumped down to the forest floor suddenly and Konohamaru followed. We are almost to the Monkey Clan's sacred temple. You better keep that mouth of yours in check. The other members of the Monkey Clan will make your time here hell if you don't, the small monkey told him. Yeah. I can't wait to get started training. I'll finally start catching up to Naruto, he said enthusiastically as he raised one of his fists into the air. The small monkey sighed and said, You haven't been officially accepted into the Monkey Clan yet. You still have to go through the rite of humility before you're accepted. What's that? A test? He asked curiously. Raichi smiled evilly and said, You'll see. Konohamaru gulped and followed the monkey. They entered a part of the forest where the trees were so large that their trunks were as big as houses. They towered hundreds of feet into the air. Under them in a large open clearing was a giant pyramid-looking temple. Small monkeys were playing outside with a larger monkey keeping them from getting too rowdy. 3 giant monkeys were in a line picking things out of each other's fur and eating them to the left of the temple. There were houses built into the giant trees everywhere. There were hundreds of monkeys in the trees of every shape and size. Wow, this place is huge, he said in amazement as he gazed around in awe. What did you expect? The entire Monkey Clan has lived here for thousands of years, he said as he led him up to the massive temple doors. What's that horrid smell? It's awful, he said while holding his nose. He. You'll see. They are expecting us, he said with an evil look. He led him inside to a vast open room with columns that towered high into the air. There was a path that led up to a throne that King Inma was sitting on and waiting for them. Up both sides of the path leading to him were monkeys standing at attention with bags in their hands. I see you made it, Konohamaru. King Inma's voice boomed loudly in the silent chamber. I hope you are ready for the rite of humility. What do I have to do for this rite? He yelled back. Just have to walk up to my throne. No running allowed. Simple who? He said as he raised an eyebrow at him. Yeah, too simple. Something's up with this rite. He mumbled to himself as he carefully moved forward. He took 2 steps forward and King Inma said. The rite had begun. Let him have it. All the monkeys reached into their bags and started throwing dung at him. He moved to dodge one steaming pile thrown at him only to catch another right in the face with a loud splat that nearly knocked him down. Ah damn! I'm just gonna catch shit wherever I go, he said as he fought to keep moving forward against the pelting storm of flying feces with his arms trying to shield his face to little avail. Some of the monkeys didn't even look like they were trying to hit him and splattered the temple walls while they hooted loudly. By the time he made it to the throne, he was covered head to toe in the revolting stuff. The temple walls were covered in waste and the air was hard to breathe because it stunk so badly. He was panting hard and scraped the foul stuff out of his eyes and flung it on the ground. Ewww, that was so gross. Why do you monkeys always throw that of all things? He yelled. King Inma was laughing at him and then blew a small horn. You made it through the first part of the rite of humility, he said as he pulled a large white cord next to him and a small mountain of dung fell out of the air and covered a very annoyed Konohamaru. Now for the second part, you have to clean every inch of this chamber, he said loudly, and the rest of the monkeys cheered. Naruto was at the small table with Fukasaku. The hut was thick with the smells of burning moss and wood as Hanabi slept soundly under a blanket on the floor. I thought she'd never go to sleep. I've never seen a human besides you with so much energy, Fukasaku said quietly. How do you think it happened? It took me weeks to learn how to go into Sage mode, he asked. Shima thinks your chakra networks are connected in a way that went far beyond what you thought. It wasn't her entering Sage mode. It was your chakra inside her that forced her into Sage mode. This explains why the sage marks on her face totally faded away so quickly after she came out of it, he said. Naruto sighed and nodded his head. That's too bad. I thought she was a miracle student there for a moment. There is no way she or anyone could learn to be a sage in 4 days, Naruto. It takes time. In some ways she is a miracle student. She survived that much will her first time and now she knows what it's like to feel nature around her. It should speed up her training in that area greatly, he stated. He looked over at her unmarked sleeping face and said, I guess so, but with her chakra being so low she will never master being a sage. Not yet. Fukasaku folded his tiny hands together and said, I give you my blessing for her to sign the Toad contract. Do you really think she's ready for this training? He asked him and leaned back on his arms. No, I don't, Naruto, but I believe in you and you believe in her. You're her master, not me. If you think you can teach her with the oil safely, I give you my permission to try. Don't end up like me though. I'd hate for you to even have one statue of failure, he emphasized. Then I'll have her sign the contract tomorrow and start chakra building training as well as the still mind training. When she has enough chakra, I'll teach her to summon, he said as he stood up. Going out to train? The elder asked. He gave him a slight smile and said, Don't worry, I'll only use 400 clones and I will not cause any loud explosions. He gave him a nod and Naruto left the hut. Hanabi woke up and stretched as she threw the moss blanket off of her and rubbed the sleep out of her eyes. I see you're awake, dear. Your breakfast is ready, Shima said from the small table. Her stomach lurched at the thought of breakfast as she looked around. Where is Naruto? she asked as she looked around. He and Fukasaku left early to go to the training grounds, she said with a smile as she placed a huge bowl of earthworm soup in front of her at the table. She eyed the bowl for a moment. You have to eat. Sage mode burns up a ton of calories. I'm sure you're starving. You didn't even eat last night, Shima said while pointing at the food on the table. She rolled her eyes and went over to the table. At first she could barely swallow the horrid stuff, and then she realized how hungry she was. Soon she was shoveling the stuff into her mouth as fast as she could. She finished the giant bowl and ate 2 10-inch long beetles on the half-shell before stopping. Shima laughed at her. You eat just like Naruto. Now I see why he eats that way. He goes through so much energy. I bet he's starving to death after every training session, she said, slightly embarrassed. That and he has bad table manners, Shima said with a laugh. Hanabi entered the open moss-covered flat area in between the mountain tops. Naruto was standing in the center of the area with the Toad summoning contract leaning against his hip waiting for her. Does this mean what I think it means? She asked hopefully as she eyes the giant scroll. Yes, Hanabi. It's time for you to sign the summoning contract. The elders agreed to it last night, he said proudly. I've dreamed of this, I just never thought it would be happening so soon, she said breathlessly. Naruto waved her over and opened the scroll. On it her name was already written in the same style that she saw when Konohamaru signed the monkey contract. She pulled out a kunai and cut her hand and pumped her fist a few times as she walked up to him. She took a deep breath and reached out to touch the contract when Naruto caught her by the wrist. He looked deep into her eyes. Everything is going to change when you sign this. With this you will not only become a member Toad Clan, you will become my disciple. I will train you far beyond what you have seen so far from me. Your every moment not spent eating or sleeping will be spent training while we are here. I just want to realize this before you sign it, he said with a serious intensity in his eyes and released her arm. She looked at him in thought for only a moment before steeling her resolve and placing her hand on the contract. It glowed slightly and then faded back to normal. Good, we begin training in earnest now, he said. Summon as many clones as you can and let's get started with stilling your mind training. Once you have warmed up we will start using the oil. She nodded her head and summoned 4 clones and mediated for 2 hours straight. Hanabi? It's time. Let's go, he said firmly. Yes, master, she said. They made their way over to the Valley of Stone Toads. I have a question, Naruto, she said when they were almost to the training ground. And that is? He said as he kept moving. How do you fight in Sage mode when you feel so well on top of the world, so to say? She asked casually. He gave her a slight smile. You only felt on top of the world because your first time is so amazing and awe-inspiring. That feeling will pass. Oh, she said in a reserved manner. They reached the oil waterfall and Fukasaku was there waiting. You will begin using the oil child. Do not worry about turning into a stone toad. Between me and Naruto, we will expel any sage chakra if you start losing control, he said. She bowed slightly and said with resolve, I am ready. Please teach me. She seems much more serious than before, Naruto. Good, she will need that attitude to succeed, he said. He reached down and put his pointer finger into the oil. Start mediating and concentrate only on this point, he said as he touched her in the center of her forehead. She felt her mind expanding out in all directions. She could felt the things near her in a strange manner. I was nowhere near to the degree that it was the day before, but now she was fighting just to keep that feeling still. Soon she felt very dizzy and crack, she fell over holding her stinging head. Ouch! What was that for? She asked in offense from the ground while rubbing her head. I knocked the sage chakra out of you. You were losing control, so I hit you with my cane to expel it from you. I could let you turn into a stone toad statue if you'd like, he said. Why is it so hard to control today? It was so easy yesterday, she said in frustration, still rubbing her fresh lump. That is simple, child. Yesterday Naruto was controlling the Sage Chakra. Today you are having to master it yourself. Fukasaku said. Hanabi! Don't complain. Naruto snapped at her. They trained her for another 2 hours with the oil with little progress. Crack, you seem to be going backwards in progress, child. The elder said as he knocked the chakra out of her. She panted on the ground. I just don't have any more chakra left to fight it, she said breathlessly. That is your problem. You can't fight it. You have to become one with it, he said wisely. Naruto gazed out across the mountains for a long moment while Fukasaku looked at him worriedly. He turned to Hanabi that was panting on the ground. Then I will give you my chakra, he said as he placed his hand in the center of her chest and forced his chakra inside of her. Soon her breath came in easier and easier in her intakes of air. Her body relaxed as it received something it had been craving for almost a month. Naruto's powerful chakra was inside her once again. Its heavenly warm embrace filled her being with power and light. Naruto, I thought you weren't supposed to use that. You could turn me into an addict, she said, but did not resist. He kept pouring his chakra into her. I think the damage is already done, and this is the only way I can keep training you to be a sage until you build up your own chakra reserves. I'm sorry we don't have the luxury of time on our side, he said in a wistful tone. He moved from feeding her chakra to healing the lumps on her head. How long did this take you to learn? She asked as he healed her. You really shouldn't expect to learn this as fast as he did. It took Jiraiya all his life and he never mastered it like Naruto did, Fukasaku stated. Naruto gave her a kind look and said, How fast you learn this is in the determination in your heart to learn it. Never give up. You can only fail if you give up, Hanabi. Now summon 4 clones. We are going to increase your training load for the last hour. Then we will start summoning theory, clone control, chakra building, balance meditation, and taijutsu after lunch. After dinner Shima will teach you the Toad Clan laws and I'll teach you chakra control and elemental theory before bed. You really meant I'd be trained every waking moment? She said in disbelief. Naruto looked at her intently and stated, No one said the path to becoming a sage was easy. At the end of the day he had to force-feed her food before putting her to bed. Naruto, I cannot condone your training methods, Fukasaku told him. She could die of exhaustion at this rate. She isn't a Jinchuriki like you. No mere human could hope to compete with your stamina, and this training is harder than yours was. I've already told you time isn't on our side. We are connected in a way you can't understand. I know how much she can take, he said before the elder cut him off. Naruto, I've been down this path before in my younger years. You can't overwork your students. It will lead to their deaths. I know. It took many years and students for me to realize this. She can't keep this up even with you healing her and feeding her your chakra. I already told you. You don't understand. I will not put her life in danger, but I can't coddle her anymore. She has to become strong. Otherwise she will always need my chakra to succeed. I will not be around forever. She has to develop her abilities herself, he stated. She doesn't need to become a sage in a week. Time may not be on your side, but you still have more time than this, he told him. Naruto sighed. I guess you're right, but she is going to have to realize how far she has to go. She will understand then why the training is so hard. True, but after training she should still be awake for dinner. I don't want to see you force-feeding her before bed again, Fukasaku said. I think I can handle that, but I still might have to feed her because she will be too tired to lift her chopsticks herself, he said with a smile. 10 days later. It was a nearing dusk on Mount Maiboku. The skies were just turning red as it started to get dark. The air was thick with the sounds of insects and the flowing water of a nearby stream. Hanabi and Naruto were mediating on square flat rock balanced on spike that towered into the air. Hanabi's uniform was cut up and dirty, but she was perfectly balanced on the stone. Fukasaku had been watching them most of the afternoon. Shima walked up beside him and said, "How is she doing?" He continued to stare up at them. "She's been balanced for over 6 hours. I think she's close. I still can't believe she mastered the oil only 2 days ago. I can hardly believe that's the same little girl that tried to save me from the brownbacks 2 weeks ago." Naruto was right. She can handle the training. Her determination to learn is only matched by his will to teach her. He turned to look at Shima's arms and said, "How has your little project been going?" She smiled at him with folded white clothes in her arms. "I finished it not long ago. I hope she likes it. Don't expand my perception too fast, touch everything with my mind, but do not disturb anything. Coexist with all of nature." She thought to herself in her mind as she went over Naruto's teachings. A gust of wind wiped her hair out to her side, but did not move her. "I can feel Gamabunta in the pond by his house. He's sleeping in the water. 2 birds are nesting on the other side of mountain in the other direction," she thought. "She is close." Shima agreed. "Now slow stretch my mind out in every direction," she thought as she fought to keep her perfect calm and inner peace. She timidly expanded her mind out in all directions slowly. The farther she reached out, more powerfully she felt. It's not as hard as it once was to control. I'm starting to feel it. Almost there. Just hold on a little longer," she told herself as she started to expand her mind faster and faster. Naruto smiled and opened his eyes. He turned to look at her. Again the dark lines started forming on her cheeks, starting in a point at the middle of her jaw and tracing up her face, widening until it encompassed her eyes. The dark lines continued until they reached the top of her forehead and crossed at the very point. Hanabi smiled and opened her eyes. "You did it. How do you feel?" Naruto said with his voice full of pride. She looked at him and gave him a shy smile and then yelled, "I feel invincible." Fukasaku laughed so hard his voice echoed off the mountain tops. "You are far from that, but congratulations." She smiled even bigger and said, "What now?" Naruto handed her a mirror. "Take a look at yourself," he said. She took the mirror without losing her balance on the flat rock and stared at her new face. She traced the new marks on her faces in disbelief with her trembling hand before she said, "Sage marks, I've got sage marks," she said in disbelief, then smiled. "All that training was worth it 100-fold for this. Thank you, Master Naruto, thank you for training me. For believing in me," she stated, overcome with emotion. "You're not a sage yet, but you are well on your way to it. You still have to master summoning and master our fighting form from Fukasaku before you can call yourself a sage. We don't have special summoning oil, so it's going to take a lot longer than mastering sage mode," he said, overjoyed with her. "Hey! Don't rain on my parade," she yelled at him. He laughed at her and innocently said, "Sorry. No sense in wasting sage mode." The elder yelled up at the two of them. She looked down at the Toadman in confusion and then back to Naruto. "What does he mean?" she asked. Naruto smiled at her and said, "We fight." Far away, Gamabunta, Gamakichi and Gamatatsu were lounging around the pond outside their house. Gamatatsu was sleeping on his back and snapped a large dragon fly out of the air. He crunched on it loudly in his stupor and rolled over. Gamakichi was next to him on his stomach sleeping. Gamabunta was relaxing in the pond when he heard several sounds like that of thunder in the far-off distance hitting in rapid succession. He picked his head up curiously and turned his ear to the sound in the distance. Gamakichi awoke from the sound and lay there for a sleepy moment until his face changed to a puzzled look. The sounds thundered again. His look changed to disbelief as he slowly pushed himself up into a sitting position. "Erg!" Gamatatsu said as he woke up and rolled over. What's with that sound of thunder? It's not supposed to rain tonight, is it? He rubbed his eyes as he got to his feet. Is that what I think it is, Pops? Gamakichi asked his father as the thunder sounded again and again in the distance. Yes, it is. There is no mistaking it, son, he said as he looked in the directions of the far-off mountains. What? It's just thunder, isn't it? Gamatatsu said sleepily. That's no thunder, son. That is the unmistakable sound of two people in Sage mode clashing in hand-to-hand combat. I can still remember the first time I heard it. It was when Naruto father mastered Sage Chakra. I could never forget that sound. The giant toad said. So that means Hanabi did it? He ha ha ha. Gamakichi laughed. She did it, he said and grabbed his brother's hands and did a strange happy dance while turning in circles with his sleepy brother. Naruto, you're something else, Gamabunta said quietly to himself as the thunder clashed even louder and shook the earth. Naruto was exhausted while trying to eat at the small table with the elders. You look tired, Naruto. Are you still going out to train tonight? Shima asked him as she set his fourth plate of food in front of him. He yawned quietly and stuck his chopsticks in his food before saying, Not tonight. I have to recharge my chakra. I've fed her my chakra for so long that I'm running dangerously low considering the final exam is tomorrow. He yawned again and slowly started eating again. I see. Even you have your limits, Fukasaku said. He yawned yet again and said, It didn't help that I underestimated her gentle fist while she was in Sage mode. I haven't had a fight that hard in a long time. Yes, she was quite the deadly combo with her clan's art and Sage mode. Fukasaku stated in agreement. Yeah, I know. I was fighting her, he said while nodding off and finally collapsing onto the table with a dull thud while snoring. That's our Naruto, giving it his all at the risk of running his chakra down to the point of chakra exhaustion, Shima said while shaking her head. He has done well to take her so far in such a short time. I'll put him to bed, he said as he hefted him over his shoulder and put him next to Hanabi that was already sleeping under a moss blanket. Even in his sleep he reached out to her and wrapped his in her arms unknowingly. I'd never seen two people share their chakra with each other the way those two do, Shima said. Nor have I. He will not say it aloud, but he says it with his every action, he said as he watched Hanabi feed him her chakra in her sleep. They intertwined their fingers as he hugged her from behind in his sleep under the moss blanket as she pressed his hand to her face. It was a warm, clear day in the Hidden Leaf Village. Thousands of ninja, nobles and officials crowded the streets on their way to the fighting arena to watch the final exam. Gaara was in one of the prep rooms with Matsuri going over her strategy for her fight. Matsuri, relax. You will do fine. This isn't a fight to the death. He is not going to kill you, he said to the very nervous girl. She wrung her hands and said meekly, I know. Naruto always seems so warm and approachable, but now that I have to fight him, he is starting to seem more like a legend that I have no chance against. I'm worried I'll just embarrass myself in front of everyone. No one said you have no chance against him. The odds are not in your favor, but I trained you as best I could against his weakness. There are many ninjas that would be ecstatic at the chance to fight Naruto, he said. It all sounds good in theory, but when you're actually matched with him it's a whole other story, she said spitefully. You can't disappoint me. You already made it farther than I expected. I'm very proud of you, he told her honestly as he held her at arm's length by her shoulders. She looked over at him. Thanks, Master. I feel a bit better now, she said unsteadily. Good. I have to leave you now and take my place with the other Kages for the fights. They should be starting soon, he said as he left. Gaara made it through the noise crowds and took his place next to Tsunade. Any word on Naruto and Hanabi's arrival? He asked her. No, nothing yet. If he misses this I'm gonna beat him silly. Everyone came to see him fight. They will not be happy if he's a no-show, and I'll have so many officials and nobles to deal with," she said through gritted teeth. "Is he normally late?" he asked. "He's always been last minute unless it has to do with training. Even Konohamaru just made it back, if that's any indication," she said knowingly. "He still has a few minutes before opening introductions. He is fighting in the 4th match. He still has time," he replied. "No, he doesn't, because Hanabi is fighting in the 1st match," she reminded him. "Oh, that is right. I had forgotten with all the work I've been doing lately," Gaara said. The time ticked slowly by, and the crowds were getting more and more restless and noisy. "Why hasn't it started yet? It already 10 minutes past noon?" one spectator said. "Yeah, I can't wait to see Sage Naruto take on Takia in the final round. How come these things never start on time?" another said. "It seems we can't wait any longer," Gaara said to her. She sighed deeply and said, "Let's start the introductions then." An umbu near her disappeared into smoke. Shortly afterwards, the doors as the bottom of the area opened and the combatants entered the fighting circle. Cheers erupted from the crowd and quickly died down quickly when they saw Naruto wasn't among the fighting in the area. "Hey, where's the sage?" "Yeah, where's Naruto? I traveled for a week just to see him fight." The crowd voiced its disapproval. They got so loud and hostile that Tsunade had to set up and yell in a commanding voice, "Silence!" The crowd died down to quiet murmurs. "Sage Naruto hasn't made it back yet. We will start the introductions without him and his student Hanabi." The crowd groaned in displeasure as they slowly went through the interdictions. Most of them were silent or seemed bored. Konohamaru did get a few cheers from Moegi and Udon when his name was called. He smiled and waved back to them, relishing the attention. They dragged out the introductions as long as possible and final started. Kotetsu, the proctor for the final exam, took to the center of the area. "The first match is Takia and Hanabi Hyuga. Ninjas, take your positions. The fight will begin in 5 minutes. If a ninja is absent, then they are disqualified," he yelled. The large, muscular, and bald monk took his place in the area. The large wooden beads around his neck shined in the afternoon rays of light. He waited with his arms in the large sleeves of his brown robe as the minutes ticked by. The Hyuga girl chickened out, a man said, and laughed. "Yeah, just disqualify her and let's move on already," another said. 2 minutes left. "Come on Naruto, you wart sage, I know you have one of your kunais buried in that arena fighting area," Tsunade said quietly to herself. Sakura walked up to Ino, Sai, Rock Lee, Choji, and Gai Sensei up in the stand, still wearing her white medic's coat. It was really busy at the hospital. "Sorry I'm late. Did I miss anything?" she asked as she took her seat. "Hanabi is going to be disqualified if she's not here in another minute," Lee said dramatically. Sakura rolled her eyes. "He's late as always. Lord Hyuga is going to be very mad at him if Hanabi doesn't get to fight." "I know. Even Naruto might have his hands full if that happens," Guy said in agreement. "It's too bad Shikamaru had to work. I'm sure he would have wanted to see this," she said in disappointment. "If he ever makes it back," Sai countered. The proctor was looking at his watch and held his hand up during the final seconds. Naruto and Hanabi appeared right behind him silently. Naruto had his arm around her and a blue kunai in his hand. Hanabi's eyes were calm and full of determination like Naruto's. She had thin black circles around her eyes and she was wearing a new uniform that Shima made for her. It was exactly like Naruto's sage uniform, white with black flame around the bottom of the trench coat, except the writing on the back was different. In the center of the back was the Hyuga clan symbol. Just under it was the Toad clan symbol. Across the shoulders it said, "Toad clan member." On the left side of her back was a list of those she had trained under: Hayashi Hyuga, Sage Naruto Uzumaki, Might Guy, Rock Lee, and Elder Toad Sage Fukasaku. Loud cheers erupted as the crowd caught sight of them, stopping Kotetsu from disqualifying Hanabi. Hayashi eyed his daughter in stunned shock. Those marks he couldn't have, not already. He thought soullessly. Sorry we are late, Naruto said to the proctor. You're cutting it close, Naruto, he said with a disapproving look. Sakura yelled out to him. I take it you were training her until the last second, Naruto. He looked over to Sakura in the crowd and scratched the back of his head. Innocently. Actually, we kind of overslept, he admitted. Sakura laughed and the hordes of onlookers followed. The roars of laughter died down and Naruto leaned over to Kotetsu and said, Sorry for landing here. Who are we fighting? He said while giving him a curious look. Hanabi is in the first match with Takia. You are in the fourth match with Matsuri Sage, he said in a reserved manner. Thanks, he said as he turned back to Takia. Takia, he said while shaking his finger in thought like he was trying to remember something. Oh yeah. Tsunade-chan warned me about him, he said as he hammer-fisted his palm. Now what did she say, he said in thought. Hanabi gave in a sour look and said, He's a monk and a master water elemental user. Oh yeah, wait, what's a monk doing at the Chunnin exams? He asked her. She gave him a sarcastic look. It clearly said, Why are you asking me? Takia respectfully said, I am seeking to become the guardian of the temple that I study at. A condition of achieving that rank is that I must obtain the rank of Jonin in our lands. I do not consider myself a ninja, but I am still bound by the laws of the 5 nations. Oh, he replied. Kotetsu cleared his throat loudly and said, Naruto, if you wouldn't mind leading the fighting area, we need to get started. The crowd has been restless for some time now. Oh, right, sorry, he said, slightly embarrassed as he leaped up to the railing around the fighting arena next to Kakashi. I hope you trained her well for this fight, Kakashi said while reading his book. Actually, I don't know the first thing about Takia or his fighting style. I focused on teaching her how to still her mind and gather the natural energies around her, he said. And is she combat proficient with it? He asked while raising an eyebrow at him. Naruto wore a dreading look. Actually no. Not really, he admitted while shaking his head back and forth. Kakashi just shook his head. So you mean to tell me that you didn't teach her anything that's going to help her during this fight? He's been training for 2 weeks for this fight and Hanabi hasn't. She is outmatched in experience, chakra and elements, possibly taijutsu too. Yeah, I guess that's true, he admitted with a strained smile. Fighters, take your positions, Kotetsu said as he raised his arm. Hanabi got into a defensive fighting pose while Takia did the same. Takia towered over Hanabi as they stared each other down. She hardly came up past his belt. Don't die out there, Hanabi, he yelled to her. Gee, thanks for the vote of confidence, Naruto, she thought angrily. The first match, Takia versus Hanabi Hyuga. Fight, he said as he threw his arm down. Byakugan, she said as the veins in her temples bulged. Takia summoned a thin wall of water around himself and an 8-foot circular pillar no thicker than a glass window. They both stood perfectly still for some time. Hey, Kakashi-sensei, why aren't they fighting? He asked curiously. Naruto, they are both short-range taijutsu fighters. Like Neji, he waits for this opponent to attack him and counter-attacks. The one that attacks first will be at a disadvantage, he replied. Takia smiled. Well, this is getting us nowhere. I guess I will lead off then. He removed the large wooden beads from around his neck and drew up the water around them. The water broke the necklace apart and surrounded each bead in an orb of water. The orbs floated out of his water wall. He made a hand sign and said, Water style, water bomb jutsu. 2 of the orbs flew at Hanabi at high speed. When they were almost at her, they exploded, sending wood shards in every direction. Rotation, she said and deflected the jutsu. Impressive, but how will you fare when I send the other 28 at you? Takia said curiously. Water style, multi-water bomb jutsu. He yelled and all the orbs rocketed at her. They filled the area where she was in dust caused from their rapid explosions. When the dust cleared, Hanabi was nowhere to be seen. Takia looked around and Hanabi charged him from behind with her gentle fist. Takia turned as he heard the attack coming and Hanabi passed right through his water wall and out the other side. It seems you have missed Hanabi, he said calmly. Damn! I know I should have connected with that strike, she thought, but never lost her outward calm look. What kind of jutsu is that water wall? Naruto said to himself. It's not a jutsu. It's just elemental chakra manipulation. Remember how when you catch a fish with your bare hands that you can't aim for where you see the fish? Kakashi said. The lights turned on in his head. Oh yeah. So it is just an optical illusion. Yes, and it doesn't take much chakra to hold that jutsu. Takia is very smart. His every jutsu that he has used so far has been to get her to waste chakra deflecting minor jutsu or to step himself up to hinder his opponent. Hanabi is drenched now. Her movements will be slower now, and it seems even her Byakugan isn't immune to his simple water wall. Even though he has many times more chakra than her, he is still trying to drain hers down. Kakashi said. Naruto mumbled. Yeah, and he's not getting anywhere near her because of her gentle fist. Yes, he has studied her well. This is why preparing to fight a single opponent is such a huge advantage. He's just toying with her right now, he replied casually. Still, you are smarter than you look, Takia said as he launched 3 water orbs at her with a wave of his hand. There's almost no chakra in those orbs. It must be a distraction dot or poison, she thought as she dodged to the left to avoid them. Takia grinned slightly and made a hand sign. Water style, water bullet jutsu. A large 10-foot-tall water bullet screamed across the arena. Hanabi was in mid-dodge as she caught sight of it from her side. Erg! No. Choice, she thought. Rotation, she yelled as the force of the blast still knocked her back even while she used her jutsu. Instantly when the water bullet jutsu hit her, he made another hand sign. Water style, great water wave jutsu. A 20-foot-tall wave of water emerged from him and thundered its way towards Hanabi. I can feel a huge amount of chakra still coming at me. I can't drop my rotation, she thought in a panic. The wave crashed into side of the arena where she was and lapped over the side of the wall, soaking the first 2 rows of spectators. The wave receded back and Takia lightly stepped on top of the water. The arena was 4 feet deep in water from his wave attack. Hanabi stopped her rotation as the wave receded. She was on top of the water and she was breathing slightly faster while scanning the water around Takia. He is bombarding her from a distance and now Takia gains another advantage. Now she's surrounded in his element. She is playing right into his hands, Kakashi said in disappointment. Impressive. Most impressive. The Hyuga's defensive justice are certainly living up to their reputation. But you cannot win with defense alone, and even the Hyuga defensive taijutsu has a weakness. You have fought well, but the advantage has always been mine. I dislike using this jutsu, but I can ill afford to waste any more chakra before the next rounds. This fight is over, he said respectfully. Hanabi smiled back at him. You're right, this fight is over. She's drawing chakra into her legs. She's going for a high-speed attack. That's not going to work. That's his water in the arena and he can likely feel any movement that is made on it. Kakashi is right. This guy is a master of conserving his chakra and tactics, Naruto thought. Hanabi shot off like a rocket at him. The water sprayed out behind her from her blinding speed. What has Naruto been teaching her? She can't use a frontal attack, not against this guy. Hayashi thought in dismay. Water style, water globe trap jutsu, he yelled as he made a hand sign. Hanabi was 10 feet from him when the water exploded up around her. Droplets rained down on the arena. When the spray cleared, she was encased in a 10-foot ball of water. Such speed, I nearly missed. You were full of surprises, but now it is over. The best jutsu isn't always the biggest. This one is simple to maintain and no ninja can live long without air. I can simply wait for you to pass out, but please just give up," he said humbly. Hanabi looked at him defiantly and moved into a fighting pose and tried to do her rotation again. "I'm afraid that's not going to work. The water is too dense for you to use that move in. Please end this now. I have no wish to hurt you," he said. Hanabi struggled to no avail in the water. Soon she was clutching her throat as air escaped her lungs until she finally remained still in the water. "Proctor?" he said as he looked over at him and waited for his determination on the match. The water globe suddenly bubbled violently as her shadow clone dissipated. "I'm done playing with your water clone. Now it's over," she yelled. Hanabi was at the far side of the arena and struck the water near the far wall lightly. Naruto smiled at her. All of Takiya's water jutsus crashed down as it quickly drained away. Takiya, who had been hiding under the water in a chameleon jutsu, had been struck in the heart by her gentle fist. He clutched his chest and breathed in shape rasp of pain and said, "I was right to fear the gentle fist of your clan. One strike was all it took. What gave me away? No one's ever seen through my chameleon jutsu before. Was it the Byakugan?" Hanabi stood over him still in her fighting pose. "No. I'm able to use small amount of sage chakra that allows me to feel where someone is. It's far beyond that of normal chakra sensor abilities and much harder to fool. I knew where you were the whole time. That's why I was on the defensive until you gave me an opening," she said. "Here I thought I was in control and you," he coughed loudly as few times, "were one step ahead of me the whole time. I yield to the better fighter," he said respectively while still clutching his chest. Hanabi reached out and struck his chest again, releasing her gentle fist attack. He took a moment to catch his breath and then stood up and bowed to her. Even in his bow he was still taller than her. Hanabi relaxed her fighting pose. "I'd like to say I'm wounded, but it's only my pride. It was an honor to fight you. You do your clan proud," he said with respect. Hanabi was slightly stunned at his manners and shyly said, "Thank you." Kotetsu stepped forward and said loudly, "The winner of the first match is Hanabi Hyuga." The crowd was silent as someone said, "Takiya lost, what an upset. I can't believe that little girl beat the hero Takiya." Another said. The murmurs grew louder and louder until it was a roar of applause drowning out everything else. In the heat of her battle she had forgotten everyone else was watching her. Hanabi shirked away from the attention as thousands of people clapped for her. Her father was grinning proudly at her ever so slightly. Hanabi was still drenched while standing next to Naruto and Kakashi as they called a break to let the field dry out. "How do you feel?" Naruto asked her. "Soaked and I've got jelly legs. I've never had so many people looking at me like that. I'm not sure I like the attention," she said shyly. "Well, if you want to be a sage you had best get used to the attention," Kakashi said. Naruto looked over at her flattened out hair. "Here, I'll dry you off." He held his hand up to use his wind jutsu and Kakashi caught him by the wrist. "Naruto, don't you remember the rules to the final exam? You can't use your jutsu to aid any of the other combatants, student or not," he warned. He gave him a weird look and said, "I'm just drying her off though. That's a stupid rule. It's still one you will get disqualified for breaking," he said as he pointed at two Umbu watching them like a hawk. He looked over at the Umbu and rolled his eyes. "Then let's go get you a towel," he said as he led her away. Not long after they got back, Konohamaru and Kimdo were called to the fighting arena. Kimdo was a shorter female ninja with short bright red hair wearing a blue uniform with long sleeves. She carried a large bamboo needle cannon on her back and two smaller ones on her belt. She had 3 kunai holsters on her left leg and another on her right. Konohamaru took field as well with a calm look about him. A poison user, Konohamaru never did like long-range poison user. Naruto commented. Is he in any danger? Hanabi asked. That all depends on the poison she uses. If things get too bad, he has an ace in the hole. He said, clearly not worried. Kakashi eyed intently and said, You didn't, did you? Yes, I did, but I told him to use it only in an emergence. He replied. Hanabi gave then a curious look. Match 2, Konohamaru Sarutobi vs Kimdo Hiria. Fight! Kotetsu said as he backed away. Kimdo leaped away backwards and readied one of her small bamboo cannons. Konohamaru pulled out a red vial. What's the matter? You scared of me? He taunted her and popped the paper seal on the bottle. Kimdo replied. I see no reason to get near a bumbling fool like you. I let my needles do my work for me, but I guess you're too slow-witted to understand that. Drink your silly anti-poison. It will do you no good. I'm a master poison maker. I carry over 100 different types on me. Tsunade put her head in her hands. I hope he's really not going to drink what I think he's going to drink, she said to herself. Konohamaru tipped up the tiny vial and drank the red liquid in one gulp. He smacked his lips. Ah, let's see you try to poison me now, he said as he threw the small vial over his shoulder. Sakura was cringing and said, Gross! I can't believe he drank it. The rest of his friends wore the same revolted looks. I wonder what the Monkey Clan did to him, he didn't even flinch, Kakashi said, clearly impressed. Kimdo grinned evilly at him. If you think that potion was anti-poison, then you're a moron. You'd have to know my family's poisons to make blood anti-poison, and I know you do not know them. Do you really expect me to believe you managed to get your hands on the blood of the legendary White Stag? I'm no fool, she said, and then laughed at him. Konohamaru gave her a confused look and said, White Stag? I've never heard of that. What I drank was the blood of my master, Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto put his head in his hands and said to himself, You idiot. Just announce it to the world, why don't ya? A few others in the crowd were revolted by this news as well, but many wonder what drinking a sage's blood would do in curiosity. Enough talking. Let's get this over with. I don't need to waste any more chakra than I have to. I still have to fight Hanabi next before I can fight Naruto, he yelled and then charged her in a straight line. Kakashi gave him a blank look. That's certainly the Naruto way of doing things, but it's really not that smart of a tactic. Kimdo rolled her eyes at him and said, Needle storm. Hundreds of needles shot out of the small cannon and a few hit Konohamaru, but he kept charging. She readied her other small cannon as she leaped back and said, Needle paralysis shot. Several of the tiny needles hit him in his left leg and still he charged her. She leaped back again and looked frantic with her back against the wall of the arena. Kami, what's it take to stop this oaf? She said to herself as she quickly readied her large needle cannon. 1,000 needle shot. She yelled and fired the large weapon. There was a large bang and smoke came out the back of the cannon. 1,000 tiny needles went fly at him. Konohamaru put up the seal of the tiger. Shadow Clone Jutsu, he said as one clone appeared and they both darted to opposite sides to avoid the head-on needle attack. He charged straight into the cloud of smoke and several loud strikes were heard. Slowly the smoke cleared away. Konohamaru was standing with several poison needles in him and Kimdo was beaten to a pulp. You long-range poison users are all the same. You hide behind your poison because you're too lazy to learn how to fight. And you called yourself a ninja. He spat at the knocked-out ninja as he pulled out the needles and tossed them on the ground. He looked over at Kotetsu in an expecting manner while pointing his hand at the disfigured ninja. Kotetsu stared at him with a blank, queer look before shaking his head. The winner of the second match is Konohamaru Sarutobi, he said quickly like it left a bad taste in his mouth. He smiled and looked around expecting the loud cheers like Hanabi had gotten. A gust of wind blew by and the chirping of a cricket sounded out in the silence of the arena. Konohamaru wore a confused look as he gazed around the arena. Everyone wore the same look. Their eyebrows were scrunched together and their mouths hung slightly agape. Konohamaru smiled a cheeky smile while he rubbed under his nose with his pointer finger. "I'm so impressive that I left them speechless," he said, clearly proud of himself. A ninja said, "How did this guy ever become a ninja?" Another said, "This is supposed to the god of Jutsu's grandson?" A leaf ninja with his head in his hand said, "The third Hokage is rolling over in his grave." Moegi wore a very strained look and clapped slowly 3 times before letting her arms fall back to her sides from the look she was getting. Konohamaru looked out at the crowd with a confused look. The veins in Tsunade's head were bulging dangerously as she stood up and pointed to the exit. "Konohamaru, just get off the field." He wore a frightened look. "Man, I get no respect," he said as he fled the field. "I can't believe I made him my apprentice," Naruto said with his head down as many onlookers just stared at him in displeasure. Kakashi gave him a strained look and said, "Maybe you should wait backstage until it's your turn to fight." He gave him a short sarcastic laugh and said, "Good advice if I've ever heard any." Naruto and Hanabi waited back in a fighter's prep room while the third match progressed. Naruto was relaxed and suddenly his eyes narrowed into a scowl while looking at the door. The door creaked open and Naruto instantly appeared next to the door and cracked Konohamaru over the head so hard that his forehead nearly hit the floor. The 2 leaf umbu guarding the door turned a blind eye to this obvious transgression of the rules. He barely managed to keep his balance and right himself before saying, "Kami! What with everyone won? Why are they all mad at me?" he said while rubbing his head. Naruto crossed his arms and yelled at him, "I don't know where to start. You made a mockery of the Chunnin exams with your fighting tactics. You used a potion I gave you that's an A-ranked Leaf Village secret that's made from my blood. Then you announce what it is and proceed to show everyone in the 5 nations just how effective it is by charging right through a master poison maker's needles. A potion that I told you to only use in the most dire of circumstances. Oh, let's not forget that you failed to grasp the whole concept of the exams. You're supposed to show off your tactic and fighting skill, which you showed none of. You can't just run roughshod over your opponents and expect for them to make you a Chunnin. What? Did you rent that space between your ears to a family of moths? You just turned me from the hero of the village to the village idiot in 2 minutes flat. Just what were you thinking?" Konohamaru offense showed on his face and he walked right up to Naruto. "What was in thinking? What was I thinking? Oh, I don't know. Maybe I was thinking that the Monkey Clan has basically taught me diddly squat. I used the tools I had, like the ninja handbook says a ninja tool is only as good as the ninja wielding it. Even a novices with a sling can beat a master with a sword. But when I uses them it's like, oh no! Konohamaru has pissed in the sacred watering hole again. I come home to find out Hanabi is a full-blown sage now that just beat the hero Takia with ease and I've got to fight her in the next round. What did you think I was thinking? I was thinking I had to conserve every ounce of chakra I had just to beat her and hope to make it to the finals to fight you." He yelled as tears started welling up in his eyes and he hung his head. Naruto's steel eyes softened. "Damn it," he said as he slugged Naruto in the arm. "I wanted to be your disciple. I wanted to follow in your footsteps. I wanted to join the Toad Clan. Not the stupid Monkey Clan. Hanabi's already a sage and all I've learned how to do is scrub shit off the Monkey Clan's temple walls and pick ticks out of their back, then I'm forced to eat them," he said. Hanabi winced at his comment. "How do you think I feel? I've always been standing in your shadow. Now I see Hanabi is getting to follow the path I always wanted to follow. A path barred to me," he said sadly. Naruto sighed and said, "You know I wanted you to be my disciple too. I took quite a few lumps arguing with the elders for you. Some things just can't be changed. Hanabi isn't a sage yet," he told him emphatically. "Humph. Those marks around her eyes say otherwise," he said miserably while pointing at the thin dark circles around her eyes. "I'm not Konohamaru. I've still got a long way to go before I'm called a sage," he said, trying to comfort him. A loud knock on the door sounded. "Sage Naruto, it's time for your match." Naruto turned back to him and said, "Stay here and try to clear your head for your next match. Show the rest of those people out there you weren't just being a lumbering oaf." Naruto grabbed him by both shoulders and gave him an understanding slight smile before nodding to Hanabi. Naruto turned and left. He came out of the doors at the bottom of the arena into the bright afternoon sunlight. The crowd got to their feet and cheering him as he walked over to where Matsuri and Kotetsu were. "Are you ready, Naruto?" Kotetsu asked him quietly. "Not just yet," he said as he took off his trench coat and threw it on the ground. "You know what Gaara asked from me," he said seriously as he removed the weights from his wrist while eyeing her. She fearfully said, "Yes." Naruto took off his shirt and removed his blue chain mail that had the words "Property of Jiraiya, if found, please return to the inn with the most liquor and prettiest ladies." He put his black undershirt back on much to the displeasure of the ladies in the audience. He pulled up his pant legs and removed the wrap around weights on his calves. They were weights that were quite well known in the Leaf Village and would have been comical in any other situation. One each of the pouches that held lead bars was the words "Fight Lee Fight" printed on them. He dropped them into the pile with a dull thud. Lee and Guy wore the exact same jaw-dropping stare. "Oh! Naruto is serious," Guy said in a stunned manner. "Is he about to do what I think he is about to do?" Lee asked Guy intently. "Lee, Guy, be quiet," Tsunade yelled at them. "Yes, Hokage-sama," they both said and hung their heads. The proctor motioned for two Umbu to come and remove the sage's effect from the field. Naruto rubbed his wrist as the two Umbu struggled to budge one of the leg weights from the ground. "Kami, this stuff weighs a ton," one of them said. "It's not a ton. It's only 200 kilos per leg weight," Naruto said. Matsuri went from being slightly nervous to blank shock. Naruto observed her reaction. "If you think those are heavy, you should see the ones Rock Lee and Guy Sensei use. Lee gave me those when they were to light for him to get any use out of them," he said casually. Both Umbu's feet were only digging a hole in the ground as they struggled to move the heavy stuff. Tsunade shoot Guy Sensei a scowl and he shirked back into his chair and put on his Umbu dog mask. He then sprinted across the arena in his obvious green jumpsuit. He gathered Naruto's weights in a flash and carried them and the two Umbu off the field in the blink of an eye. He reappeared in his seat without the mask on and whistled a tune innocently like nothing had happened, fooling no one. Naruto looked at Matsuri intently. "My first time at the Chunnin exams there was a match that outshined all the other matches," he said as he stretched out his arms behind him. "It was a match so close that inspired me and nearly all the Leaf Ninjas in my age group. Many said the best fight of the exams was my own with Niji, but they were wrong. My fight didn't hold a candle next to their fight. The fight wasn't seen by everyone because it was a preliminary fight in between the second and third task. One of the ninjas was a humble man studying the ways of the fist from his master. The other seemed to be an invincible ninja that have never even been touched in combat. The humble man was knocked down again and again, yet he always stood back up and kept fighting. If anyone that day burned brightly with the will of fire, it was him. He managed to do something no one had ever done before. He broke the seemingly invisible ninja's defenses and hurt him. He nearly won, but the other ninja broke one of his arms and legs. He was knocked out and still he stood up in his sleep to keep fighting," he said while stretching him hands. "But who were these ninjas?" she asked in confusion. Naruto gave her a perplexing look and said, "I figured you would have already known. They are both in the arena right now." Matsuri looked around at the crowd for a moment before turning her eyes back on him questioningly. "The humble man of the fist is Rock Lee and the other you know quite well," he said while pointing at Lee in the crowd. "Who was the other?" she asked carefully. It was your master, Kazekage Gaara, he said. She blinked a few times in shock. But what does that have to do with our match? She asked curiously. Naruto placed his right arm behind the small of his back and presented his left arm out in front of him. That's Rock Lee's fighting stance, Sakura said in confusion. That's because today I will be fighting you with that humble man of the fist style of taijutsu, he stated. Matsuri resumed her fighting stance as Naruto gave the proctor a nod. Match 4, Matsuri vs Naruto Uzumaki. Fight! He said as he threw his hand down. Naruto leaped backwards as Matsuri grabbed her bladed whips. She launched her whips at him with frightened speed. When the blades were almost to him, he charged right in between them with all the speed of Lee in his younger years. Matsuri was so surprised at his speed she could only wince her eyes shut as Naruto's fist came flying at her head. Naruto stopped his punch an inch from her face. Matsuri slowly opened her eyes. Naruto grinned at her with his fist right at her face and disappeared in a blur of movement. She could hear his rapid footsteps, but couldn't see him as she scanned the area for him. I'll have to go on the defensive and wait for an opening dot if I even get one, she lamented. Whip armor jutsu, she said as she made a hand sign and the whips wrapped themselves around her body. The points of the whips writhed like snakes on her shoulders. She pulled out 2 sayas from her belt and went into a defensive fighting pose. Naruto appeared in front of her and yelled, Leaf Gale! He swept her feet out from under her with a kick and disappeared again. Her whips tried to catch him, but they were far too slow to catch him as she fell on her rear. She quickly got back up and resumed her fighting pose while scanning for him. Sai said, He is toying with her. Even I can see that. Guy gave him a disagreeing look and said, I'm afraid you're wrong. He is testing her, seeing how much speed she can handle. Sakura gave him a questioning look and asked, How can you be so sure? Because it's the same way Lee tests Naruto for their sparring matches. Lee knows he's much faster than him, so he slows down to near his level. Otherwise Naruto wouldn't learn anything from fighting him, Guy said and turned back to the fight. He's too fast. I can't use any jutsu when I can't even see him, she thought. Naruto appeared right in the middle of the arena near her and stopped. Now's my chance, she thought. She threw both of her sayas with all her might and pulled out a kunai and charged him. Naruto never moved as the sayas went whizzing over his shoulders. Just as she neared him, the whips on her shoulders suddenly jerked back and the sayas she had thrown came racing back at Naruto. She put wires around the sayas blades. Interesting, Choji said. An attack of that kind has no chance of working on him, Guy stated, and Lee nodded in agreement. She was almost in stabbing range when Naruto ducked down and struck her in the center of her chest with a hard elbow that sent her flying back as the sayas flew over his head. She rolled a few times on the ground before coming to rest, curled into a ball gasping for breath. When are you going to get serious? He yelled at her in an angry voice. She managed to get on all fours trying to recover from the massive blow. Do you honestly think you can fight me like this? You're closing your eyes every time I attack you. Your attacks are half-hearted and you can hardly look at me without trembling, he yelled. She slowly struggled back to her feet and fear was still in her eyes. Naruto stated in a calmer voice and then took in a deep breath. Fine, if you will not fight me with everything you have, then I will just give you a reason to. He turned and looked to Gaara and said, I'm sorry, Gaara, I'm not going to hold back anymore, just like you asked me to. Several people looked back and forth at each other, clearly worried. Naruto pulled out one of his cobalt blue kunais and held it to his chest. He never seemed to move, but Gaara appeared in front of him. Naruto stood behind him with his kunai at Gaara's neck. Gaara's eerily clam eyes locked onto Matsuri's. I will kill Gaara of the Red Sands if you don't rescue him from me. On my Nindo, I swear it, he yelled as killing intent poured out of him. Everyone eyed him with blank shock as 4 Umbu rushed the arena fighting area to save Gaara. Gaara held up his hand to stop them. They were on the edge of the railing around the arena posed to jump down. Halt! I give my life freely to Naruto. Don't interfere with the match, he said without emotion. Matsuri's look went from fearful and shy to sheer horror and worry as she looked up to Gaara's seat and saw he wasn't there. Gaara, what are you saying? Fight back! Don't do this! She said nearly in tears. Gaara tilted his head slightly at her and said in an emotionless tone, No, I will not fight back. Naruto saved me from myself. From becoming a monster. He even helped bring me back to life with his chakra. I owe him 2 life debts. He can take my life at any time he wishes it. I will never resist it. But master, she said in tears. Naruto's cold eyes locked onto hers and said, Are you going to hold back now? Did I not give you reason enough to fight? Murmurs of disbelief filled the crowd. He wouldn't, Rock Lee said in shock. Sakura had tilted her head down so her hair covered her face. He would. He's never broken his Nindo. Not once, she said, clearly worried. The others stared at her soullessly. Naruto pressed harder with his kunai and a single drop of blood rolled down Gaara's neck. Master, she pleaded with her voice cracking. Gaara looked at her without emotion and said, No more words, Matsuri. You know what you have to do now. Matsuri's eyes steeled with resolve as she grabbed the handles of her blade whips and they uncoiled themselves from her body. The wind picked up around her as she drew up a great amount of chakra for her next attack. Naruto held up a hand sign from around Gaara and said, Shadow Clone Jutsu. 2 clones appeared at either side of him and moved in front of him and Gaara. Now the fight begins for real, Kakashi said as he removed the bandage covering his Sharingan. The whips in her hands stalked high into the air ominously like writhing snakes as her killing intent rose. I will not let you hurt Gaara. I don't care if I die. I will save Gaara or die trying. She yelled at him and charged him with such speed that she almost looked like she disappeared with her whips leading the way. Naruto's clones got into their fighting pose. Wind Spear Jutsu, she yelled as she rolled hand over hand and her whips rocketed toward the Naruto's face that was holding Gaara. The clones managed to catch the whips and divert them away just before a great gale of wind shot out of the point of them. The gale was so forceful that it sounded like thunder and it tore right through a tree and into the stone of the wall behind it. A dust cloud erupted behind them. The clones eyed her coldly as they tossed aside the ends of the whips and charged her with blinding speed. She backpedaled, fighting tooth and nail, defending against the flanking strikes with her whips. Again and again the blindly fast strikes came at her and she fended them off. Her whips were moving so fast at one point that they looked like a giant raisin. A strike to her chest got through from the Naruto in front of her and knocked her into a kick from the one behind her. She yelped and hit the ground on all fours in pain. The clones jumped back. You're this weak? You get it, do you? What are your goals and aspirations? Naruto yelled angrily. She struggled several times to stand before finally righting herself with great effort. I'd never seen Naruto like this. It almost like he's talking down to her. This just isn't his normal style, Choji said in confusion. She panted loudly, trying to catch her breath. What do you mean? I only want to become a fine ninja and take care of Gaara, she said while breathing sharply and holding her side. Are you a fool? Don't you know what your village expects of you? Who do you think they would look at to become the next Kazekage if I killed Gaara right now? He yelled as his clones went on the attack again. She almost didn't get her guard up in time to fight back. She barely fended off the attack as the clones jumped back, leading her panting. You can't mean me? Surely they would choose someone on the council, she said in disbelief while trying to catch her breath. You're wrong. They would look to you. You're the only student Gaara ever took. Only you have learned his lessons from him personally. Don't you understand what that means? When you took Gaara as your master and he took you as his student, the both of you took on a huge responsibility for your village. He yelled at her. The clones again attacked her. In a rapid exchange, and she hit the ground again. She struggled to get up on her knees. She was clutching her ribs on her left side. Through a great amount of pain, she yelled at him. "What responsibility are you talking about?" Naruto's cold eyes locked onto her and bored deep into her soul. "To become the strongest ninja of your village. You're the one that your people will look to one day surpass Gaara and become their next Kazekage." Matsuri went to blank shock just as she reached her feet as Naruto continued his verbal strikes at her. "If Gaara died right now, the first person they would look to replace him with is you. It is only logical they would look to you. Tell me, if your village's head Jonin commander is poisoned with a new kind of poison, who will you fetch in your village to cure him? If there are rumors of the Leaf Village preparing to attack your village, what type of squad do you send, an ambassador negation squad or a stealth information gather squad?" His sharp words hit her as the wind started picking up in the arena and moving in circle around him. She regained her composure slightly and could only look at the ground, clearly telling him that she didn't know. Naruto pressed ever so harder with his kunai at Gaara's. Blood trickled free down his neck as Matsui started to panic until again resolve steeled into her eyes. Many in the crowd winced at the sight of more blood because of Gaara's unflinching calm. "Haven't you been watching your master? Haven't you been learning from not only what he teaches you, but also what he does?" He yelled as his clones that were flanking her suddenly threw kunais with exploding tags on them at near point-blank range. The calm determination that had settled over her severed her will. She never took her eyes off the real Naruto, but gracefully moved back and forth avoiding the kunais what whistled past her face. She smelled the smoke of the tags burning as she crouched down in preparation to her next attack. Kakashi's face suddenly went blank. "No, Naruto, you can't be thinking of using that kind of attack on her," he thought soullessly as he watched with the Sharingan. The two clones caught each other throwing kunais with burning paper bomb and charged her. A kamikaze attack, Kakashi thought in dread. Matsuri managed a hand sign just before they hit her. "Earth barrier jutsu," she said just as the two clones impacted the barrier with their flaming paper bomb kunais, leading the way into the cone of sand that had just formed around her. The front of the cone of sand exploded as she tore thought a split second before the paper bombs went off. The explosion was nearly ear-shattering and only severed to propel her faster at Naruto. Naruto grinned at the charging Matsuri eyes as she charged him at inhuman speeds. "Finally! There is no fear in your eyes," he thought as his eyes' pulps went from round to flat and he became one with everything around him. Naruto emitted frightening amount of chakra just before Matsuri's blinding attack was about to hit. Sakura's eyes went blank in disbelief. "He can't be. He's using Sage mode on her." "Ah!" she yelled as she closed in for an attack only to be shot almost instantly into the far wall of the arena in a cloud of dust from the sheer air pressures around him. Murmurs in the crowd rose as many of the spectators wondered if she had ever survived the attack. Naruto sent a gale of wind at her with a single swipe of his hand to clear away the dust cloud. She was barely upright in the crater in the wall from the impact of the attack. "How many hours do you train every day?" he yelled loudly through the howling wind. Her arms were limp in front of her as blood trickled out of her mouth while she panted. "I train myself to become stronger with every waking moment I have. I go weeks without sleep just to continue train in hopes that one day I will be strong enough to become Hokage." The wind moved faster and faster around him and the sound grew louder and louder. "I'm going to show you now why they call me the Master of the Wind. If Gaara is so important to you, then fight through my wind and come stand beside him now. Do that and I will release him," he yelled with his intense eyes locked onto her. The wind howled and then it moved so fast that it screamed, drowning out every other sound. A tree in the arena was suddenly uprooted and sent flying into the sky. The spectators were shielding their eyes from the sheer wind pressure. Within the span of 2 breaths, Naruto had summoned a full-blown cyclone that reached into the heavens and twisted the very clouds themselves. "Kami the Sage certainly lives up to his legends," one ninja said, holding onto his seat so that he wasn't swept away. The umbu that had been posed to jump into the arena was catching people that flew into the air. They put weight seals on them to hold the spectators in their seats. Everyone had to shield their faces and hold onto something as they weathered Naruto's jutsu. Guy had given up of yelling to Kakashi and started using the Umbu's secret hand sign language to communicate with him. Kakashi, stop this madness. He has gone too far. He signed to him. Have faith in him, Guy. He has been using the wind to protect her. The crater she is in was from the air pressure he summoned behind her just before impact. He signed back to him. Matsuri hit the ground on all fours and struggled against the wind to move forward. She had not lost her determination as she struggled inch by inch to get closer to Gaara. Only 30 seconds had passed since he summoned the cyclone, but it seemed like a lifetime to everyone else as an Umbu squad finally made a jutsu barrier around the fighting area. They were shielded from the wind, but the cyclone still towered into the clouds and the sound was still defying. The crowd was captivated watching Matsuri crawl with all her might to keep moving forward like they were living each movement themselves. She fought inch by inch to keep moving closer. When she got within 10 feet of them she was tore away. She dug her hands into the earth to stop herself, but only served to leave an arching trail of ripped earth with her hands. Again and again she fought to get to the eye of the cyclone until the earth around it looked like a spiral pattern of ripped earth. Each time she got close to the center, they cheered through the sounds of the wind for her. Each time she was torn away and she struggled forward again, they cheered her on even louder. She had fought her way back to the eye of the gale and had stopped. She couldn't move forward anymore, but she refused to let go. A stray leaf hit her in the forearm with such force that it embedded itself over an inch inside her arm. She winced at the pain and slid a few feet back as she panted. 11 minutes, he's held that jutsu for 11 minutes, and she has bared it all, she can't have anything left. Kakashi thought to himself. She reached out and dug her right hand into the earth and tried several times to pull herself forward to not avail. She took a few sharp breaths and yelled with all her might into the gale of wind. Suddenly the gale stopped with a last gentle gust and Naruto could be seen with his hand in front of him holding two fingers up in a half-tiger hand sign. His cold steel orbs had returned to their brilliant blue and he wore a kind understanding look on his face with a hint of sadness. The wind howling had cut off the first part of what she said as she yelled so loudly everyone could hear her through their ringing ears. We'll save Gaara. I can't become a Kage yet. I'm not ready. I need to train harder and learn to lead people first. I'm just not ready. But I will not give up. She panted on her stomach a few times before opening her blurry eyes and looking over at Naruto. Naruto then uttered the two scariest words she had ever heard in her life. His eyes suddenly became bloodshot and tears formed at the rims as he said, I'm sorry. He drew back his kunai in preparation of stabbing Gaara. No! She yelled and with her last bit of strength she threw her kunai at his head. He moved his blade slightly and sent her flying kunai clattered off his own. It whirled in the air and embedded itself into the earth a few feet away. Matsuri and the entire crowd wore a look of horror as Naruto stabbed Gaara through the heart from behind with a dull thud sound that echoed loudly in the silent arena. Gaara's calm look turned to one of shock an instant before he poofed into smoke. Several spectators and the Umbu that rushed the arena from before poofed into smoke as well. Lesson over, he said with a smile on his face. Everyone looked around in disbelief. But then, where's Gaara? She asked breathlessly as she got up into a sitting position. Naruto gave her a kind look as he pointed to the Kazekage's chair. Right over there, he said. Matsuri and the stunned crowd looked over at his chair. He was standing next his chair with his Kazekage hat in one hand and his other arm resting over the backrest of the chair. His hair was a total mess from Naruto's wind jutsu. Everyone was staring at him questioningly. He carefully replaced his ceremonial Kazekage hat and said, Just before the fight I went to use the bathroom. Even a Kage has to go sometimes. When I returned I saw myself in the arena as a hostage. I saw no need to announce my return, he said calmly yet awkwardly at the same time. An eerie silence fell over the crowd for a long moment. But you said if I couldn't rescue him that you'd kill him and you never break your nindo? she said in shock. Naruto nodded his head replied. I said I'd kill Gaara of the Red Sands. I don't know a Gaara of the Red Sands. I once met a man called Sasori of the Red Sands, but as far as I know that is not a title your master carries. Matsuri laughed a laugh of relief. She laughed for a long moment before saying, I knew it. In the heat of battle I couldn't trust it, but I knew that wasn't Gaara. She told him through her tiredness. Naruto gave her a curious look as he walked over to her. How? My clones are perfect. He asked her intently. She nodded her head slightly. Yes, your clone was perfect. Right down to which leg and hand is his dominate, even how he moves and talks, all perfect. She said with a smile even though her ripped-up hands and broken ribs were causing her to tremble in pain. He eyed her intently and asked, Then what made you suspect it was a clone? The smile faded from her face and she wore a longing look of wonder. It's the way you look at him. I've never seen two people look at each other the way you two do. What do you see when you look at Gaara? She asked in a lost manner. He gave her a slight smile and kindly said, Forfeit the match and I'll tell you. She gave him a short sarcastic laugh before saying, I can hardly hold myself upright. There is no way I could fight you anymore even if I wanted to. She looked over at the proctor hiding in the doorway of the fighter's prep room and said, I forfeit. I am not his equal in combat, knowledge, or jutsu. She collapsed onto her back as her will to hold her trembling body upright faded. Naruto held the blue kunai to his chest and closed his eyes in concentration. He disappeared for no more time than an eye blink and was standing with Gaara by her side. He took his arm out from around Gaara's shoulder and leaned down next to her. He looked sincerely over at Gaara. That's it, that is the look I am talking about. I've never understood it. It's like you two are looking at each other saviors. Please tell me what you see that I cannot? She asked honestly and longingly for the answer. Naruto reached down and gently held her hands. He poured his healing chakra into her grass-stained, earth-soiled, and ripped-up hands. As he healed her he said sincerely, I see hope when I look at Gaara. Hope? She questioned him. He continued to heal her hands and closed his eyes and nodded at her. Yes, I see hope when I look at him. What do you mean though? Why do you see hope that would cause you to look at him in such a way? She asked in confusion. Naruto finished healing her hands and her trembling stopped. He placed her hands in the center of his stomach on his black undershirt and said, You know what I am, right? And you know what Gaara used to be? You are one of the few blessed with this knowledge? He asked her clearly, not sure if she knew. She nodded her head a few times. He told her, Do you know what happens to us when we are released from that burden that we carry? She teared up at the mere thought of it and nodded her head again. Now you see. Gaara is the only one of our kind that was ever released from it. And lived. But Naruto cut her off and kindly said, It was Elder Chiyo making amends for her past deeds. I only provided the chakra for her so she could use the jutsu. She was the hero that day, not me. He answered her unasked question as two medical ninjas set a stretcher next to her. Master Gaara? She asked. Gaara held up his hand to stop the medics from taking her away. What do you see when you look at Naruto? She asked so sincerely yet still longingly and curiously for the answer. Gaara took a long deep breath. I am not as gifted with words as he is, but I will tell you as best as I can. I too see hope when I see him. Master, please explain this as he did. She begged him with a curious look on her face. As you asked. He said with a slight bow of his head to her. I used to be the perfect shinobi. I was a mindless killing machine that the leaders could use to kill anyone they saw fit to send me after. I never failed or got hurt during my missions. I felt that true power only came from relying on oneself. I defined my existence by beating or killing other shinobi. It was only after we fought that I learned true power come from protecting those precious to you. He said. She asked. How did he change your mind, Gaara? What did he do to turn you away from being a mindless killer into someone that protects others? After a long moment of silence he said, He did the same thing to me that he did to you today. Naruto has a way of teaching the ones he fights as he fights them. He has a way of changing people. The day that we fought, I had yet to find my equal in combat. I had only been touched a few times in my life and no one had ever come close to defeating me. I toyed with him at first, but his eyes changed and it was then that he fought me earnestly. He was protecting his team members and I was relying only on myself. He fought me with a strength and determination I had never seen before. No matter how many times I knocked him down, he kept getting back up to fight me again. Even after all our chakra was spent and we could hardly move, he still crawled toward me to attack me again. I tried to kill him, but he was only trying to defeat me. I then asked him what makes him so strong and he told me. True strength only comes from protecting those precious to you. That day he defeated me and I changed. I no longer wished to be a mindless killer. I wanted to protect people the way he did. I wanted to see people the way he did. I wanted to become truly strong. Strong like the ninja I admired most. Like Naruto Uzumaki. So that it, she said softly as she closed her eyes. The crowd had erupted in cheers as the proctor announced Naruto as the winner. One of the medical ninja looked her over and quickly said, She entered chakra exhaustion. This is not good. We need to get her to the hospital to receive treatment right away. They quickly loaded her onto the stretcher and Naruto stopped them. He looked over at Gaara and said, Lend me some of your chakra. Gaara gave him a questioning look as he held up his hand and produced a burning flame of blue chakra. Thanks, he said as he took the chakra and leaned down in front of Matsuri. What did you need my chakra for? He questioned him curiously. I'm a clumsy medic at best, but no one in the village is better at performing this jutsu than me, he said as he forced the chakra into her heartstring chakra line. The color returned to her face as he finished the jutsu. That still doesn't answer why you needed my chakra when you have so much of your own still left, Gaara said. Naruto gave an estranged smile. Let's just say that if she gets used to having that jutsu preformed on her too much, that the side effects would be less complicated if it's your chakra rather than mine. Gaara peered at him and said, Side effects? Just trust me. I'll tell you about it later, he said innocently. The medical ninja looked her over. Her condition has stabilized. What jutsu did you use on her great sage? He asked curiously in disbelief. Naruto smiled innocently. Oh, that, I used the array. Naruto stopped in mid-sentence as his face went slack when he saw the angry scowl that Tsunade was giving him. The bulging vein in her forehead clearly showed she was about to jump out of her seat and wring his neck at any moment. Naruto took a step back from her and stuttered. Do you think we should get off the field now, Gaara? He said quickly and he ran back into the fighter's prep room away from the Hokage's angry scowl. Tsunade mumbled angrily to herself. I can't believe he used that forbidden jutsu again. And right in front of everyone. And with Gaara's chakra. She fumed in her seat at the door he has left through.
That's it for this video. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and follow me on my other social media accounts. Anime God here, and I'm signing off.